The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Democracies rise and fall through the will of their people. Empires expand through the vision of their rulers. Wars end when one side surrenders or both sides exhaust themselves. But what happens when two legendary military geniuses, locked in a 150-year conflict that has consumed billions of lives, are torn from their universe mid-battle and thrust into another reality's war? What happens when the question isn't who will win, but whether any victory is worth the cost? The Battle of the Iserlohn Corridor had reached its critical phase. Admiral Reinhard von Lohengramm stood on the bridge of his flagship Brunhild / golden hair catching the light from tactical displays that showed thousands of ships locked in brutal combat. At 27 years old, he commanded the Galactic Empire's combined fleet with a brilliance that had earned him the nickname, Golden Brat, from envious nobles and terrified enemies alike. His ice-blue eyes tracked fleet movements with the precision of a master chess player seeing 12 moves ahead. "Admiral, the Alliance's Hyperion is attempting to break through our left flank," his chief of staff reported. Young Wen-li's 13th Fleet is executing a fighting retreat toward the corridor's center. Reinhard's lips curved in something that might have been a smile. Of course he is. Young never commits to direct confrontation when he can achieve strategic advantage through maneuver. Signal Mittermeier and Reuenthal, close the pincer. I want Yang's fleet isolated and forced to engage on our terms. Beside him, Siegfried Curtius, red-haired, loyal to the point of legend, the one person Reinhard trusted without reservation, studied the tactical display with concern. Reinhard, Yang's fighting retreat might be bait. He's positioned his forces where our pursuit would overextend our supply lines. Then we'll end this before supplies become relevant, Reinhard replied. Signal all ships, full offensive. Today, we capture young Wen-li and end the Alliance's last hope of victory. The Imperial fleet surged forward, thousands of warships moving with coordinated precision that only decades of military tradition and iron discipline could achieve. Beam weapons lanced across the void, neutron beams and directed energy fire creating deadly crossfire patterns. Nuclear missiles traced brilliant arcs through space. Ships exploded in silent flowers of destruction as armor failed and reactors breached. 7 light-years away, in subjective spacetime, Yang Wen-li sat in his flagship Hyperion's command chair looking exactly like a man who wished he was anywhere else. At 33, he appeared older, exhaustion etched in his features, dark eyes carrying the weight of battles he'd won through brilliance he'd never wanted. His rumpled uniform suggested a man who'd forgotten to care about appearances, more interested in historical texts than military decorations. Admiral, the Imperial fleet is accelerating their pursuit, his tactical officer reported. Von Lohengramm is committing his full force to the engagement. Of course he is, Young murmured, sipping cold coffee that had been sitting on his command console for hours. Reinhard's greatest strength is his willingness to commit fully once he's identified the decisive point. Unfortunately for him, the decisive point isn't where he thinks it is. He turned to his second-in-command. Commodore Attenborough, begin Phase 2. Pull our forces back through the corridor's center, then collapse our formation into the defensive sphere. Let Reinhard overextend himself chasing us. Julian Mintz, Yang's teenage ward and protege, stood nearby watching his adoptive father with the fascination of someone learning from a master. Admiral, won't that expose our flanks to Imperial fire? Temporarily, Yang confirmed, lighting a cigarette despite medical regulations. But Reinhard's doctrine emphasizes decisive battle. He'll focus on what he perceives as our main force, which means he won't properly screen his own flanks. Walter, he gestured to the scarred, cynical commander of the Rosen Ritter Regiment, take your ships through the northern approach once Reinhard commits. Hit his supply vessels and command support ships. Make it hurt. Walter von Schonkopf grinned like a wolf scenting blood. With pleasure, Admiral. Nothing I enjoy more than teaching aristocratic imperial officers that wars are won by logistics, not glory. The Alliance fleet executed Yang's orders with the practiced efficiency of people who'd survived impossible odds through trust in their commander's genius. Ships that should have been destroyed years ago, held together by determination and creative maintenance, moved into defensive formations that maximized their limited firepower while minimizing exposure to Imperial superiority. The two fleets collided in the Iserlohn corridor center, thousands of warships from both sides engaging in the kind of massive space battle that had defined the 150-year war between the Galactic Empire's autocracy and the Free Planets Alliance's struggling democracy. Every tactical doctrine developed over a century and a half of conflict was on display: Imperial precision versus Alliance flexibility, overwhelming force versus desperate innovation, aristocratic command tradition versus democratic merit-based leadership. Then reality screamed. A tear opened in space, not the normal subspace distortions that ships navigated during faster-than-light travel, but something fundamentally wrong. Purple and blue energy cascaded from a wound in the fabric of the universe itself, expanding rapidly from a pinpoint to a kilometers-wide maw that swallowed light and twisted physics into impossible geometries. On Brunhild's bridge, alarms shrieked across every station. "Admiral," the sensor officer shouted, his voice cracking with something approaching panic, an emotion Imperial officers were trained never to display. "Massive spatial distortion opening directly in front of our fleet. Energy readings are off scale, this isn't natural." Reinhard's tactical mind processed the impossible data, running probability calculations and strategic assessments in the seconds before catastrophe struck. "All ships, emergency deceleration. Break formation N." The dimensional rift expanded like a supernova, and gravitational forces that violated known physics grabbed the Imperial fleet in an inexorable grip. Ships at the formation's leading edge were pulled toward the tear first, hundreds of vessels disappearing into the impossible colors as their crews experienced terror no amount of military discipline could suppress. Brunhild tumbled toward the rift, its engines firing at maximum reverse thrust with zero effect. Reinhard gripped his command chair as artificial gravity failed and the bridge lights flickered. Through the forward view screen, he saw something that his rational mind rejected even as his strategic instincts catalogued it: another universe, visible through the tear, with stars in unfamiliar configurations and ships with designs he'd never encountered. "Courteous," Reinhard said quietly, his voice carrying the eerie calm of someone facing death with aristocratic dignity, "if this is the end, I'm glad you're here with me." Courteous met his friend's eyes, loyalty unshaken even as reality broke around them. "Wherever this takes us, Reinhard, we'll face it together." The Imperial fleet plunged through the dimensional rift. On Hyperion, young Wen-li watched the same impossible tear swallow his enemy's fleet and felt the gravitational distortion reach toward his own forces. He took a final drag on his cigarette, stubbed it out methodically, and spoke with the resigned tone of someone who'd long since accepted that the universe had a terrible sense of humor. "Well," Young said to no one in particular, "I suppose, died in mysterious spatial anomaly, is at least more interesting than assassinated by political rivals or executed by my own government for being too successful. Julian, make sure you write that in the history books if I don't survive this." "Admiral," Julian started, fear evident in his young voice. "All ships, stop resisting the gravitational pull," Ong ordered, cutting through the panic spreading across the Alliance fleet. "We can't fight physics we don't understand. Shut down engines, divert all power to structural integrity fields, and prepare for whatever comes next. If we're going to die, let's at least do it efficiently." The Alliance fleet stopped fighting the inevitable and allowed the dimensional rift to pull them through. Both fleets, thousands of warships from the Galactic Empire and Free Planets Alliance, locked in combat seconds ago, crossed the dimensional barrier simultaneously. On Deep Space Nine, in the Alpha Quadrant of the Milky Way galaxy in a universe where humanity had learned to be explorers first and warriors second, Commander Benjamin Sisko stood in operations reviewing defensive deployments when every sensor in the station suddenly went haywire. "Benjamin," Major Kira's voice carried urgency from her tactical console, "we've got a massive subspace rupture forming near the wormhole. Energy readings are consistent with a dimensional breach, similar to what happened when the Defiant encountered that parallel universe, but orders of magnitude larger." Sisko moved to her station, his command presence immediately shifting into crisis mode. Red alert. Raise shields, charge weapons. Dax, what are we looking at? Lieutenant Commander Jadzia Dax's hands flew across her science console, her trill spots visible on her forehead as she concentrated. Benjamin, this is incredible. The rupture is opening directly between normal space and what appears to be another dimensional framework entirely. And something's coming through, multiple somethings. I'm detecting thousands of vessels crossing the barrier. Thousands? Chief O'Brien interjected from engineering, his Irish accent thickening with stress. Commander, our shields won't hold against a fleet that size if they're hostile. Let's not assume hostility, Sisko replied, though his hand moved to the communications panel. Hail them on all frequencies. And get me a tactical assessment, I need to know what we're dealing with. The dimensional rupture expanded, and two massive space navies emerged into Federation space like ancient armies spilling through a siege breach. The ships were unlike anything in Starfleet's extensive databases, sleek, angular designs with prominent beam weapon arrays and missile tubes, their hulls bearing markings in scripts that universal translators struggled to process. They moved in formations that suggested centuries of tactical doctrine, maintaining coherence even as dimensional transit clearly damaged systems and disoriented crews. At the fleet formation centers, two flagships stood out, a golden-hulled vessel radiating aristocratic authority, and a battered gray ship that somehow conveyed the impression of desperate competence. Around them, thousands of supporting vessels maintained defensive postures, beam weapons tracking potential threats with paranoid precision. On Brunhild, Reinhard von Lohengramm pulled himself upright as the bridge stabilized, his golden hair disheveled but his composure rapidly reasserting itself. Damage report. Where are we? His chief of staff consulted flickering displays. Admiral, we've crossed into unknown space. Star patterns don't match any Imperial charts. We're detecting a large space station nearby, unknown configuration, and the Alliance fleet emerged simultaneously. Young Wen-li's Hyperion is 3,000 kilometers to our port. The Alliance? Reinhard's eyes narrowed. Then we're still at war. Signal all ships to. Belay that, Curtius interrupted, his tone urgent but respectful. Reinhard, look at the sensor data. This isn't the Iserlohn corridor. We don't know where we are, what threats we face, or if our ships can even navigate in this space. Attacking Yang now could leave both our fleets vulnerable to whatever brought us here. Reinhard paused, strategic calculation overriding immediate tactical impulse. Curtius was right, consolidating position before engaging unknown variables was basic military doctrine. Very well. Full defensive formation, weapons armed but hold fire. And monitor the Alliance fleet. If Yang makes any aggressive moves. On Hyperion, Yang Wen-li was giving almost identical orders, though with considerably less aristocratic bearing and substantially more exhausted resignation. All ships, defensive posture, Yang instructed, accepting another cup of coffee from Julian. The Imperial fleet is here too, which means Reinhard's probably deciding whether to attack us or figure out where we are first. Given his strategic acumen, he'll choose the latter, which gives us time to assess the situation. Frederica, he turned to his beautiful, competent second-in-command, what are our sensors telling us? Rear Admiral Frederica Greenhill consulted her displays with the calm efficiency that made her invaluable. Admiral, we're definitely not in Imperial or Alliance space. The spatial metrics are wrong, subspace frequencies don't match our navigation databases. And there's a large installation nearby emitting energy signatures we've never encountered. It's hailing us. How civilized, Yang murmured. At least someone in this reality believes in communication before violence. Open a channel. The view screen flickered, and Commander Sisko's face appeared, dark-skinned, bald, with the bearing of someone who'd learned command through experience rather than aristocratic birth. He wore a uniform in colors Yang didn't recognize, black with gray shoulders, carrying insignia that suggested rank but not the ostentatious decorations Imperial officers favored. Unknown vessels, this is Commander Benjamin Sisko of Deep Space Nine, representing the United Federation of Planets, Sisko said, his voice carrying authority tempered with diplomatic caution. You've emerged near Bajoran space through what appears to be a dimensional breach. We're prepared to offer assistance, but I need you to identify yourselves and state your intentions. Yang studied the commander's face, processing verbal cues and body language with the same analytical precision he applied to fleet tactics. This was a military officer trying to be a diplomat, someone who understood violence but preferred alternatives. Interesting. Commander Sisko, Yang replied, deliberately keeping his tone non-threatening, I am Admiral Yang Wen-li of the Free Planets Alliance. We were engaged in military operations in our own universe when an unknown spatial phenomenon transported us here. We have no hostile intentions toward your Federation, was it? Though I should warn you that the other fleet that arrived with us represents a government we've been at war with for 150 years, so the situation is complicated. On DS9, the operations crew processed that information with varying degrees of alarm. 150 years of war. Dax whispered. Benjamin, their entire civilization has been locked in continuous conflict for a century and a half. That's longer than the Federation has existed. Before Sisko could respond, a second transmission cut through, imperious, aristocratic, and carrying the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Station Commander, this is Admiral Reinhard von Lohengramm of the Galactic Empire. Reinhard's face appeared on a split screen beside Yang's. He looked young, beautiful in an almost ethereal way, with golden hair and ice blue eyes that assessed Sisko with the same precision a predator evaluated prey. We did not choose to enter your space, but now that we're here, you will provide coordinates for the nearest Imperial territory so we can negotiate our departure. And inform the Alliance fleet that our temporary ceasefire during this crisis does not constitute peace. Once we understand our situation, the war will resume. Yang sighed audibly on his screen. Reinhard, we don't even know where we are. Can you possibly restrain your conquest reflex for 10 minutes while we figure out if we can get home? I need no advice from a Democrat who's spent his career defending a corrupt, inefficient system, Reinhard shot back. Especially not from someone who's only avoided defeat through luck and running away. I prefer to think of it as strategic withdrawal and not dying unnecessarily, Alm replied mildly. But if you'd like to measure our tactical records, I'm happy to compare notes on who's actually won more engagements with inferior forces. Sisko watched the exchange with dawning comprehension. Two legendary commanders, clearly enemies, unable to resist strategic debate even in the middle of a crisis. This was going to be complicated. Admirals, Sisko interrupted before the argument could escalate, I suggest we continue this conversation in person. Deep Space Nine has facilities for diplomatic meetings. If you're both willing, I'll transport representatives from each of your flagships to the station so we can discuss the situation like civilized people instead of through view screens while your fleets aim weapons at each other. Reinhard and Yang exchanged glances across their respective screens, a moment of unspoken communication between enemies who understood each other better than either would admit. Acceptable, Reinhard said. But I'm bringing sufficient security forces. Of course you are, Yang replied. I'll try not to bring an army, but no promises. Commander Sisko, we'll see you shortly. Try to have decent coffee available, I have a feeling this conversation is going to require significant caffeine. As the transmissions ended and both admirals prepared for transport, Sisko turned to his senior staff with an expression mixing concern and fascination. Major, double security throughout the station, Sisko ordered. Dax, compile everything we know about dimensional breaches and coordinate with Starfleet science. O'Brien, make sure our shields can handle whatever technology those ships are using. And someone find me everything we have on military dictatorships and democratic governments at war. I need to understand what we're dealing with. Benjamin, Dax said quietly, those two fleets represent thousands of warships and presumably millions of personnel. If they decide to fight each other here, we can't stop them. And if they decide to fight us, then we'd better make sure they don't, Sisko replied. The Dominion's already trying to conquer the Alpha Quadrant. The last thing we need is 2 more empires from another dimension adding to the chaos. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. The transporter room materialized 2 groups simultaneously, a calculated risk that spoke to either Sisko's confidence or his desperation to prevent conflict before it started. On the left pad, golden light coalesced into Admiral Reinhard von Lohengramm and his entourage. On the right, Admiral young Wen-li and his officers appeared with considerably less fanfare. The contrast was immediate and striking. Reinhard wore an immaculate white imperial uniform with gold trim, a crimson cape fastened at his shoulders, his golden hair pulled back to reveal aristocratic features that belonged on Renaissance paintings rather than military commanders. Beside him stood Siegfried Curtius in red-haired complement to Reinhard's gold, his green eyes watchful and his hand resting near his sidearm. Behind them, 4 imperial officers in black uniforms maintained rigid attention, their bearing suggesting elite special forces rather than ceremonial guards. Yang's group looked like they'd been interrupted during shore leave. The Admiral himself wore a rumpled Alliance uniform that suggested he'd slept in it, possibly multiple times, his dark hair uncombed, a cigarette already appearing in his hand before Chief O'Brien could protest about station regulations. Julian Mintz stood beside him looking young and nervous, while Walter von Schonkopp leaned against the transporter pad with the casual arrogance of someone who'd killed too many people to be impressed by formal settings. Frederica Greenhill completed the group, her crisp uniform and professional bearing the only thing preventing Yang's delegation from looking like refugees. The 2 groups stared at each other across 3 meters of transporter room floor, 150 years of war, billions of dead, and fundamentally opposed ideologies creating tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Commander Sisko stepped forward before either admiral could speak, his command presence filling the room. Admirals, welcome to Deep Space Nine. I'm Commander Benjamin Sisko, in command of this station and Federation operations in the Bajoran sector. If you'll follow me to the wardroom, we can discuss your situation in more comfortable surroundings. Federation. Reinhard repeated, his voice carrying the crisp pronunciation of someone educated in multiple languages. Your political designation suggests a democratic alliance. How quaint. Tell me, Commander, how many years has your Federation been at war with itself? How many factions compete for power through corruption and incompetence rather than merit? Our Federation has been at peace internally for over 2 centuries, Sisko replied evenly, leading them through DS9's corridors. We've had external conflicts, but our member worlds cooperate through diplomacy and mutual respect, not through force. 2 centuries of internal peace. Yang interjected, sounding genuinely interested. That's remarkable. The Free Planets Alliance has existed for 164 years, and we've been at war with the Galactic Empire for 150 of them. Commander Sisko, I'd very much like to understand how your system maintains democratic legitimacy without collapsing into the kind of corrupt inefficiency that's plagued my own government. Perhaps because true democracy is impossible, Reinhard said, his tone sharp. The Free Planets Alliance is living proof that democratic systems degenerate into oligarchies run by corrupt politicians who prioritize re-election over competent governance. At least the Galactic Empire is honest about power, the strong rule, the weak obey, and decisions are made by those qualified to make them. And who determines qualification? Young asked mildly, lighting his cigarette despite O'Brien's scandalized expression. You, Reinhard. Your definition of merit conveniently places aristocrats at the top of the hierarchy. Meanwhile, billions of imperial citizens live under authoritarian rule with no voice in their own governance. They have prosperity, order, and purpose, Reinhard countered. More than your corrupt democracy provides its citizens between political crises. Sisko noted that both admirals argued with the ease of people who'd had this debate countless times, enemies who knew each other's positions intimately. They reached the wardroom where Dax, Kira, and Worf waited, along with Odo lurking in the corner with his shapeshifter's unreadable expression. Please, be seated, Sisko gestured to the conference table. Before we continue, let me introduce my senior staff. Lieutenant Commander Jadzia Dax, my science officer. Major Kira Neres, my first officer. Lieutenant Commander Worf, strategic operations. And Constable Odo, chief of security. Worf's eyes narrowed as he studied both groups, his Klingon warrior instincts clearly assessing combat capabilities. You command fleets of thousands of vessels each. Your military tradition appears extensive. What enemy required such massive force deployments? Each other, Young and Reinhard said simultaneously, then glared at each other for the unintended synchronization. Dax leaned forward, her trill spots prominent as scientific curiosity overcame diplomatic protocol. You've been fighting each other for 150 years. Admirals, that's. I've lived 8 lifetimes, and I've never heard of a conflict sustained that long between spacefaring civilizations. How have either of you survived? Barely, Young admitted, accepting coffee that a station ensign nervously provided. He took a sip, grimaced, but drank it anyway. The war began as an ideological conflict, the Galactic Empire's autocracy versus the Free Planets Alliance's democracy. Neither side has been able to achieve decisive victory because we're too evenly matched. Every battle we win, they win too. Every territory they conquer, we liberate 3. It's a meat grinder that's consumed billions of lives across generations. And yet the Alliance continues fighting a war it cannot win, Reinhard said, his ice-blue eyes hard. Prolonging suffering through democratic stubbornness rather than accepting the inevitable. The inevitable being your conquest and our subjugation? Young replied, his exhausted tone sharpening slightly. Forgive me if I'm not enthusiastic about trading corrupt democracy for enlightened tyranny. At least under democracy, when the government fails, citizens can vote them out. Under your system, when the emperor fails, people die until a new autocrat seizes power. Which is precisely why I reformed the empire, Reinhard said. Eliminated corrupt nobility, promoted based on merit, ended the worst excesses of aristocratic privilege. I'm building an empire where competence matters more than birth. By killing everyone who stood in your way, Young observed. I've read the intelligence reports, Reinhard. Your rise to power involved political purges that would make any democratic government fall. The only difference is that you call it reformation instead of tyranny. Curtius shifted uncomfortably, the only person in the room who could openly show disapproval of Reinhard's actions without consequence. Admiral Young, Lord Reinhard did what was necessary to save the empire from collapse. The previous nobility was corrupt beyond redemption. I don't doubt it, Young replied. I'm not defending the old empire. I'm questioning whether replacing one autocracy with a more efficient autocracy is actually progress, or just better packaging on the same fundamental problem. Major Kira spoke up, her Bajoran pragmatism cutting through the philosophical debate. Admirals, with respect, you can argue political theory after we figure out how to get you home. Commander Sisko, what do we know about the dimensional breach? Sisko nodded, grateful for the redirection. Dax, brief them. Dax activated the wardroom's display, showing sensor data from the dimensional rupture. The breach appeared to form spontaneously during your battle. Our preliminary analysis suggests it was artificially created, not a natural phenomenon. Someone or something deliberately opened a rift between your universe and ours. Why? Frederica Greenhill asked, speaking for the first time. Her voice carried the crisp efficiency of someone who dealt with logistics and strategic planning. What purpose would bringing our fleets here serve? Unknown, Dax admitted. But I can tell you what we do know, the breach is still open, but it's unstable. It's located near what we call the Bajoran wormhole, a stable wormhole that connects this quadrant to the Gamma Quadrant, 70,000 light-years away. The interaction between your dimensional rift and our wormhole is creating dangerous subspace distortions. Can we use it to return home? Reinhard asked, his strategic mind immediately focusing on operational concerns. Possibly, Dax said. But there's a problem. The breach is contracting. We estimate it will collapse completely in approximately 72 hours. After that, reopening it would require technology and energy expenditures beyond what either your fleets or our station can provide. Silence greeted this pronouncement as both admirals processed the implications. 72 hours, Yang repeated softly. 3 days to either return home or be permanently stranded in this universe. He looked at Reinhard. Which means we need to cooperate. The dimensional rift won't care about our ideological differences. Cooperation, Reinhard said the word like it tasted bitter. Between the Empire and the Alliance. While our fleets sit within firing range of each other. Your fleets are also sitting within firing range of my station, Sisko interjected, his tone hardening slightly. And I should inform you that we're currently at war ourselves. The Dominion, a power from the Gamma Quadrant, has been attempting to conquer the Alpha Quadrant. We've been fighting them for over a year. The last thing we need is 2 more fleets adding to the chaos. Worf's hand moved toward his phaser. Commander, perhaps we should discuss the tactical situation privately. No need for privacy, Lieutenant, Sisko replied. I want both admirals to understand the situation completely. Odo, show them. The shapeshifter moved forward, his liquid features somehow conveying disapproval despite their fluidity. He activated another display showing recent battle footage, Jem'Hadar soldiers storming Federation positions with suicidal dedication, Dominion warships overwhelming Starfleet vessels, Vorta diplomats offering peace terms that amounted to total surrender. The Dominion is controlled by the Founders, Odo explained in his gravelly voice. Shapeshifters like myself, though I rejected their philosophy long ago. They believe order must be imposed on solids, non-shapeshifters, through absolute control. The Jem'Hadar are their genetically engineered soldiers, bred to fight and die without question. The Vorta are their diplomatic and administrative caste, cloned and programmed with absolute loyalty. Yang watched the footage with the analytical detachment of someone who'd seen too much war to be shocked by new variations. Genetically engineered soldiers with artificial loyalty. That's efficient. Horrifying, but efficient. How do you fight an enemy that doesn't question orders and doesn't fear death? With great difficulty, Sisko admitted. We've been holding them at the wormhole, preventing them from bringing their full forces through. But we're losing ground. The Dominion has superior numbers, and their Jem'Hadar are tactically competent enough that our technological advantages don't always compensate. Reinhard studied the tactical displays with the focused intensity of a grandmaster analyzing a chess position. Your defensive strategy is sound but insufficient. You're fighting a holding action when you need a decisive engagement. If this wormhole is their supply line, you should be fortifying it absolutely, creating such overwhelming firepower that any Dominion fleet attempting passage is destroyed before clearing the event horizon. We've tried, Kira said, frustration evident. But the Dominion sends ships in waves. We destroy 1 fleet, 3 more appear. They're wearing us down through attrition. Then you need to take the fight to them, Reinhard replied. Send a strike force through the wormhole, destroy their staging facilities in the Gamma Quadrant. Cut the supply line at its source rather than defending against infinite waves. We've considered it, Sisko said. But we don't have the forces to both hold the wormhole and mount an offensive into Gamma Quadrant. We'd be leaving the Alpha Quadrant vulnerable. Classic strategic dilemma, Yang murmured, sipping his terrible coffee. Insufficient forces to simultaneously defend and attack. Reinhard, I'm surprised you're offering tactical advice to the Federation. Shouldn't you be more concerned with returning home to continue conquering the Alliance? I'm concerned with understanding the strategic situation, Reinhard replied coolly. If we're to be here for 72 hours, I need to know what threats we face. And Commander Sisko, your Dominion shares certain characteristics with the old Empire, absolute control, manufactured loyalty, disregard for individual autonomy. I find their philosophy distasteful. High praise, coming from an autocrat, Yang observed. I believe in rule by the competent, not in eliminating free will entirely, Reinhard shot back. There's a difference between strong governance and totalitarian control. Is there? Yang asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a matter of degree rather than kind. Before Reinhard could respond, alarms suddenly shrieked across DS9. Kira's hand flew to her comm badge. Ops, report. Major, we've got multiple contacts emerging from the wormhole, a voice crackled back. Dominion attack fleet, 30+ vessels. They're forming assault formations. I think they detected the dimensional breach and decided to take advantage of the confusion. Sisko stood immediately. Red alert. All hands to battle stations. Admirals, I suggest you return to your ships. Wait, Reinhard said, his tactical mind clearly processing rapid calculations. Commander, how many vessels do you have for defense? The Defiant and 6 Starfleet patrol ships, Sisko replied. Not enough against 30 Dominion warships. Then you need reinforcements, Reinhard said. He tapped his communicator, a device that looked primitive compared to Federation technology but apparently worked across dimensional barriers. Reinhard to Brunhild. Combat alert. All ships, assume defensive formation around the station. Authorization von Lohengramm. Belay that. Yang snapped into his own communicator. Hyperion Actual, Yang to all Alliance vessels. Defensive formation, protect the station. Do not, repeat, do not fire on Imperial vessels unless fired upon first. We're defending the station, not fighting each other. Confirm. Both admirals looked at Sisko. Commander, Reinhard said, we have thousands of warships. You have 8. This Dominion fleet represents a tactical problem we can solve in approximately 4 minutes. After that, we can resume arguing about political philosophy. Yang. Sisko looked at the other admiral. Yang lit another cigarette, his exhausted expression somehow carrying grim humor. Reinhard's right. For once in 150 years, we have a common enemy. Besides, if the Dominion destroys your station, we lose our best chance of understanding the dimensional breach. Enlightened self-interest says we help. Sisko made a decision that would either save his station or doom the entire quadrant. Coordinate with my tactical officers. And admirals, try not to start a war between yourselves in the middle of saving us from mine. No promises, Yang and Reinhard said simultaneously, then glared at each other again. As both admirals rushed back to the transporter room, Dax looked at Sisko with wide eyes. Benjamin, did we just form an alliance with 2 legendary commanders from another dimension? I think we formed a temporary non-aggression pact with optional cooperation, Sisko replied. Let's hope it lasts longer than the next 4 minutes. Through DS9's viewports, the Dominion fleet emerged from the wormhole in perfect formation, 30 attack ships with the distinctive insectoid design that had come to represent the Gamma Quadrant threat. They moved with coordinated precision, clearly expecting to overwhelm the station's minimal defenses before reinforcements could arrive. They hadn't counted on running into 2 of the greatest military minds in another universe's history, backed by thousands of warships whose crews had spent 150 years perfecting the art of killing each other. The Battle of Deep Space Nine was about to teach the Dominion a lesson in tactical humility. The view screen in DS9's operations center showed a sight that would be analyzed in Starfleet tactical courses for decades, 2 massive fleets that should have been destroying each other instead forming a coordinated defensive perimeter around a Federation station. The Galactic Empire's vessels moved with geometric precision, their golden and white hulls gleaming as they established overlapping fire zones. The Free Planets Alliance ships positioned themselves with looser formations that somehow maintained cohesion through practiced flexibility rather than rigid doctrine. And between them, like an insect swarm encountering a steel wall, the Dominion fleet hesitated. Commander Sisko stood in ops, his command chair abandoned as he watched tactical displays showing force deployments that dwarfed anything the Federation had fielded during the entire Dominion War. Dax, what am I looking at? 2 things, Benjamin, Dax replied, her fingers dancing across her console as she tried to process sensor data that kept contradicting itself. First, both fleets use technology that's simultaneously more primitive and more advanced than ours. They don't have warp drive, their ships operate on conventional fusion propulsion and momentum physics. But their beam weapons are incredibly sophisticated, and their tactical formations suggest centuries of doctrinal refinement. And second? Sisko asked, watching as Imperial and Alliance vessels continued their deployment with barely a communication passing between them, both admirals clearly commanding their forces through some kind of synchronized strategic understanding. Second, the Dominion is realizing they're outmatched, Dax said. Those 30 attack ships were supposed to overwhelm 8 Federation vessels. Instead they're facing thousands of warships commanded by what appears to be military genius on a scale we've rarely encountered. On the Defiant, Chief O'Brien sat at the helm with Commander Worf at Tactical, both watching the deployment with professional assessment that mixed admiration and concern. Those formations, Worf rumbled, his Klingon warrior instincts clearly impressed. They move with coordination that suggests extensive combat experience. Every vessel knows its position, its fire lanes, its role in the overall tactical structure. This is not parade ground precision, this is earned through blood. O'Brien agreed, his engineer's mind cataloging the technical disparities. But their ships are vulnerable, Commander. No shields like we have, they're using armor and point defense systems. A direct photon torpedo hit would punch straight through their hulls. Then it is fortunate they do not intend to fight us, Worf replied. And unfortunate for the Dominion that they came expecting easy prey. On the Brunhild, Reinhard von Lohengramm stood before his command throne. He never sat during combat, with tactical displays showing the battlefield in three-dimensional holographic detail. His fleet had deployed in the Imperial Navy's standard defensive formation, central command group surrounded by screening elements, with heavy cruiser squadrons positioned to deliver concentrated firepower on any vector that breached the perimeter. Admiral, the Dominion vessels are holding position at the wormhole's exit point, his chief of staff reported. They appear to be reassessing their tactical approach. As they should, Reinhard replied, his ice-blue eyes tracking fleet movements with the precision of someone who saw warfare as three-dimensional chess. They entered expecting minimal resistance. Instead they face overwhelming force deployed with clear defensive doctrine. Their commander, assuming they have one with actual authority rather than just following predetermined orders, must decide whether to attack, retreat, or attempt negotiation. Beside him, Curtius studied the Dominion ship configurations with concern. Reinhard, their vessels are smaller than ours, but sensor data suggests significant weapons capacity relative to their size. If they're suicidal enough to attack despite numerical disadvantage, then they'll die demonstrating the folly of fanaticism over strategy, Reinhard finished. But I suspect even manufactured soldiers have some survival instinct. Signal Admiral Mittermeier and Admiral Reuenthal have their squadrons moved to flanking positions. I want the Dominion to see that any attack vector they choose will face concentrated fire from multiple directions. On the Hyperion, young Wen-li sat in his command chair looking like a man who'd accepted that the universe had a terrible sense of humor and decided to stop fighting it. Julian stood at his side, young face tight with nervous energy, while Frederica coordinated fleet movements with the practiced efficiency that made Yang's chaotic command style somehow functional. Admiral, the Imperial fleet has positioned itself with predictable geometric precision, Frederica reported. They've created overlapping fire zones covering all approach vectors to the station. Our forces are filling the gaps in their formation, maintaining our own tactical flexibility while complementing their rigid structure. Reinhard's strength is decisive concentration of force, Yang observed, lighting yet another cigarette. He deploys his fleets like a hammer seeking a nail. Our strength is adaptive positioning, we flow around enemy attacks rather than meeting them head-on. Put them together, and you get a defense that's simultaneously immovable and flexible. The Dominion commander must be having nightmares trying to find an opening. Sir, shouldn't we be more concerned about coordinating with the Imperial fleet? Julian asked. We're defending the same position as our enemies. Julian, remember your history lessons, Yang replied, stubbing out his cigarette and immediately lighting another. The enemy of my enemy is my temporary ally who I'll probably be fighting again in 72 hours. But for now, the Dominion represents a greater threat than Reinhard, mostly because Reinhard's predictable. These Dominion forces. He studied the tactical display. Frederica, their formations are too precise. No variation, no adaptation to our deployment. What does that tell you? They're either supremely confident or following predetermined attack plans, Frederica concluded. Artificial soldiers with programmed tactics rather than adaptive strategy. Exactly, Yang confirmed. Which means we can anticipate their moves if we understand their programming. Signal Walter, have his Rosen-Ritter squadron position near the station's lower pylon. I suspect the Dominion will attempt a flanking maneuver there once they commit to attack. On the lead Dominion attack ship, the Vorta commander, a pale, slight figure named Weian 7, stood on the bridge with the manufactured comm that came from knowing death was temporary for clones. His Jem'Hadar first officer, a massive warrior named Kudakaten, studied the tactical display with the focused intensity of a predator recognizing unfamiliar prey. 2 unknown fleets, Kudakaten observed in his gravelly voice. Thousands of vessels. Our intelligence provided no warning of Federation reinforcements on this scale. Because they're not Federation, Weian replied, his smooth diplomatic tones carrying undertones of concern even his genetic programming couldn't completely suppress. Observe their configurations, first. Those vessels don't match any Alpha Quadrant design. And their positioning suggests not cooperation with the Federation, but protection of mutual interest. Then we have 3 enemies instead of 1, Kudakaten concluded. We should withdraw, await reinforcements. And report to the founders that we fled from an inferior force. Weian's manufactured smile never wavered, but his eyes showed calculation. No, first. We attack. The founders do not tolerate cowardice, and these unknown vessels, no matter how numerous, cannot match Dominion discipline and dedication. Our Jem'Hadar do not know fear. We will demonstrate that numerical advantage means nothing against warriors bred for war. On DS9, Odo watched the Dominion fleet's movements with the particular insight of someone who understood founder psychology despite rejecting their philosophy. Commander Sisko, the Dominion is going to attack. Weian, I recognize his ship's configuration, he's been cloned at least 7 times, won't retreat without engaging. The founders measure success through commitment, not survival. Can we hail them? Sisko asked. Attempt to negotiate? You can try, Odo replied. But Weian's orders probably include assessment of these new forces. He'll attack because the founders need intelligence on potential new enemies more than they need 30 ships. Sisko opened a channel. Dominion vessels, this is Commander Benjamin Sisko of Deep Space Nine. You are outnumbered and outgunned. I'm offering you the opportunity to withdraw peacefully. There's no need for bloodshed today. Weian's face appeared on the view screen, his expression carrying that unsettling manufactured friendliness that made Vorta simultaneously charming and disturbing. Commander Sisko, how kind of you to offer terms. But I'm afraid the founders require information about your new associates. Their ship configuration suggests they're not from the Alpha Quadrant. Where did you acquire such significant military reinforcements? That's none of your concern, Sisko replied. What matters is that you're facing overwhelming force. Withdraw now, while you still can. I think not, Weian said pleasantly. You see, Commander, the Dominion has learned that apparent strength often masks fundamental weakness. Perhaps these mysterious allies will prove less formidable than they appear. There's only one way to find out. May your prophets have mercy on your soul, assuming they exist. The channel closed. The Dominion fleet began its attack run. Here they come, Kira announced from tactical. All 30 ships, full attack formation. They're targeting the station's shield generators first, standard Dominion doctrine. Signal both foreign fleets, Sisko ordered. Tell them the Dominion has committed to attack. Rules of engagement are their discretion, we won't second-guess their tactics. On Brunhild, Reinhard received the transmission and smiled, not with pleasure, but with the cold satisfaction of a chess player whose opponent had made exactly the predicted move. Dominion vessels are attacking. All ships, engage at will. Target their propulsion systems first, I want prisoners for interrogation, not just debris. Authorization von Lohengramm. The Imperial fleet opened fire. Beam weapons, neutron beams, directed energy cannons, focused particle streams, lanced across the void from thousands of Imperial vessels simultaneously. The Dominion had expected to face 8 Federation ships with limited firepower. Instead, they encountered a wall of directed energy that turned space into a killing field. The lead Dominion attack ship's shields collapsed under concentrated fire from 3 Imperial cruiser squadrons. Its hull, designed to withstand Federation phasers, proved inadequate against weapons that operated on different energy frequencies and delivery mechanisms. The vessel broke apart, spilling atmosphere and bodies into the void. 3 more Dominion ships died in the first 30 seconds of engagement. On Hyperion, Young watched the Imperial fleet's devastating first salvo and shook his head. Reinhard's approach to warfare: apply overwhelming force at the decisive point until the enemy stops existing. Frederica, signal our forces, target the Dominion ships attempting to flank the station's lower section. Use concentrated missile fire, let's show them that numbers and discipline mean nothing against properly executed tactics. The Alliance fleet's approach differed fundamentally from Imperial doctrine. Where Reinhard deployed concentrated beam fire, Yang's forces used coordinated missile salvos, hundreds of nuclear-tipped projectiles launched in precisely timed waves that saturated Dominion point defense systems. The explosions created temporary gaps in defensive coverage, which Alliance beam weapons exploited with surgical precision. 4 more Dominion ships vanished in nuclear fire. On the Defiant, Worf watched the slaughter with professional appreciation. Efficient. Brutal. These admirals do not waste time with warning shots or proportional response. They engage to destroy, completely and without hesitation. They've been at war for 150 years, O'Brien replied, watching as another Dominion vessel broke apart under Alliance missile fire. That kind of experience teaches you not to give enemies second chances. Commander Sisko watched from DS9 as the Dominion fleet, which had confidently expected to overwhelm the station, died in less than 3 minutes. The few surviving ships attempted to retreat toward the wormhole, but Imperial and Alliance forces had already cut off that vector. Trapped between 2 tactical doctrines that had been refined through a century and a half of mutual slaughter, the remaining Dominion vessels had no chance. Cease fire, Sisko ordered. Hail the surviving Dominion ships. Give them the opportunity to surrender. On Weyoun's flagship, shields collapsed, propulsion damaged, life support failing, the Vorta commander studied his viewscreen with the detached curiosity of someone who knew his current life was ending but would continue in another clone. Fascinating. We encountered military doctrine more sophisticated than anything in our Alpha Quadrant intelligence databases. These unknown fleets fight with coordination that suggests extensive combat experience against peer opponents. The founders will be very interested in this information. We should surrender, Kudakaden said, his warrior pragmatism overcoming Jem'Hadar conditioning. Our mission is lost. Preserving intelligence for the founders serves their interest better than dying pointlessly. Agreed, Weyoun replied. Open a channel to the Federation station. Sisko's viewscreen flickered, showing Weyoun's face, still smiling despite obvious injuries and the smoke filling his bridge. Commander Sisko, it appears your mysterious allies are quite formidable. I believe we'll accept your earlier offer of peaceful withdrawal. That is, if you're still inclined to be merciful. Power down your weapons and surrender, Sisko replied. We'll take your crews into custody and provide medical treatment. But Weyoun, tell your founders this, the Alpha Quadrant has new allies. If the Dominion continues its aggression, you'll face more than just the Federation. Oh, I'll certainly inform them, Weyoun said pleasantly. Though I suspect they'll interpret today's events quite differently than you intend. Until we meet again, Commander. The transmission ended as Wei-an initiated his flagship self-destruct, ensuring the Founders would receive his intelligence through clone resurrection rather than through prisoner interrogation. The remaining Dominion vessels, 5 of the original 30, powered down their weapons and transmitted surrender codes. On Brunhild, Reinhard watched the aftermath with strategic satisfaction. A decisive engagement with minimal casualties to our forces. The Dominion learned an important lesson today: numerical advantage means nothing without tactical competence. Signal the fleet, maintain defensive formation. The battle is won, but the war continues. On Hyperion, Jan lit another cigarette inside. 3 minutes. We just destroyed 25 enemy ships in 3 minutes. Reinhard and I finally fought on the same side, and it lasted less time than a commercial break. I'm not sure if that's tragic or fitting. Julian looked at his mentor with concern. Admiral, we saved the station. Shouldn't we consider that a victory? We killed hundreds of soldiers who were genetically programmed to obey orders they never questioned, Yang replied quietly. We demonstrated superior tactics against an enemy that couldn't adapt. Yes, Julian, we won. But I'm not sure victory is something to celebrate when it comes this easily. Wars should be hard. If they're too easy, we forget why we're fighting them in the first place. On DS9, Sisko stood in ops as the station's shields powered down and damage control teams began assessing the aftermath: minimal damage, no casualties, and a tactical victory that had required almost no Federation participation. Benjamin, Dax said softly, we just witnessed 2 of the most devastating fleet actions in recorded history, and our station wasn't even scratched. Those 2 admirals commanded their forces with precision that our best tactical simulations couldn't predict. I know, Sisko replied, watching through viewports as thousands of foreign warships maintained their defensive positions. Which means we need to understand them, not just their tactics, but their motivations. Because in 72 hours, they'll either return home or become permanent residents of our universe. And Dax, I'm not sure which outcome concerns me more. Major Kira approached with a tactical report. Commander, both admirals are requesting permission to beam back to the station. They want to discuss what happens next. Of course they do, Sisko said. Because saving us from the Dominion was just the opening move. Now comes the real negotiation: what do they want in exchange for their help, and what price is the Federation willing to pay? As both admirals prepared to return to DS9, the dimensional breach near the Bajoran wormhole pulsed with unstable energy, still open, still contracting, and still representing the only chance for 2 legendary commanders to return to a war that had consumed 150 years of their civilization's histories. The question wasn't whether they could go home. The question was whether they wanted to. The wardroom felt different on the second meeting: less tentative exploration, more tactical negotiation between parties who'd proven they could work together when necessity demanded. Reinhard and Yang returned with their full command staffs this time, and Sisko had assembled not just his senior officers but also a subspace link to Admiral Ross at Starfleet Command, whose weathered face on the viewscreen suggested he'd been awoken for this emergency briefing. Admirals, Admiral Ross said without preamble, I've reviewed the tactical footage from your engagement with Dominion forces. In my 30 years of Starfleet service, I've never seen that level of coordinated fleet action. You destroyed 25 warships in under 3 minutes with 0 friendly casualties. I need to understand what we're dealing with. You're dealing with 150 years of military doctrine refined through continuous warfare, Reinhard replied, his aristocratic bearing somehow translating even through subspace transmission. The Galactic Empire has spent a century and a half learning how to kill the Free Planets Alliance efficiently. The Alliance has spent the same time learning how to survive despite being outmatched. When you combine both doctrines against an enemy that's never faced either. He gestured elegantly. The result is what you witnessed. And you did this while still technically at war with each other, Ross observed. That suggests either remarkable discipline or shared interest that transcends your conflict. Shared interest, Yang said, stubbing out yet another cigarette. Specifically, the interest in not being stranded permanently in another universe because we let the Dominion destroy our only chance of studying the dimensional breach. Enlightened self-interest is a powerful motivator, Admiral Ross. That brings us to the immediate issue, Sisko interjected. Dax, update them on the breach's status. Dax activated the holographic display showing the dimensional rift, now visibly smaller than when both fleets had emerged. The breach is contracting faster than our initial projections suggested. We now estimate complete collapse in approximately 48 hours, not 72. The interaction between the dimensional rift and the Bajoran wormhole is creating feedback effects that are accelerating the closure. 48 hours, Reinhard repeated, his tactical mind clearly recalculating mission parameters. That changes the strategic timeline significantly. Can you stabilize it? We're trying, Dax replied. But the technology involved is beyond our current understanding. The breach operates on principles that combine your universe's physics with ours in ways that violate several fundamental laws we thought were constant. To stabilize it, we'd need to understand how it was opened in the first place. Which brings us to a question no one's asked yet, Yang said, his exhausted eyes suddenly sharp. Who opened it? Dax, you mentioned the breach was artificially created. Someone deliberately pulled our fleets through during that battle. The question is why? And who had the capability, Frederica added, her logistics-trained mind identifying the operational requirements. Creating a dimensional rift of this magnitude would require extraordinary energy expenditure and knowledge of interuniversal physics that neither our civilizations possess. Someone or something wanted both your fleets here specifically. Odo shifted in his corner, his liquid features somehow conveying suspicion. The Dominion has been experimenting with advanced subspace weapons. It's possible they created the rift accidentally while testing new technology near the wormhole. Or deliberately, Worf growled. If the founders believed they could use dimensional technology to access new conquest opportunities, they would pursue it regardless of risk. That's a terrifying thought, Kira said. The Dominion already controls the Gamma Quadrant. If they gained access to other universes, they'd spread their totalitarian philosophy across infinite realities, Yang finished. Which is why we need to close that breach permanently, not just let it collapse naturally. A naturally closed rift might reopen. But if we can seal it using controlled methods, we ensure no one, not the Dominion, not other dimensional threats, can exploit it. Agreed, Reinhard said, surprising everyone by immediately supporting Yang's strategic assessment. The dimensional breach represents unacceptable strategic risk. If hostile forces from either universe could cross at will, it creates perpetual instability. Better to seal it completely and accept that our presence here was temporary. Admiral Ross leaned forward on his view screen. Admirals, I'm going to be direct. Starfleet Command has significant concerns about having two massive military fleets from another universe in Federation space. Your help against the Dominion was appreciated, but we need assurances that once the breach issue is resolved, you'll return to your own universe peacefully. Of course, Yang said immediately. Admiral Ross, neither the Empire nor the Alliance has any interest in remaining here. We have our own war to fight, our own people to protect. This universe is yours, we're just temporary visitors trying to go home. And yet, Ross continued, his tone careful, in 48 hours, you may not have that option. If the breach collapses before we find a way to stabilize it, you'll be stranded. Thousands of warships, millions of personnel, all requiring resources the Federation may not be able to provide long-term. We need contingency planning. You need to know if we'll become a threat, Reinhard said bluntly. Admiral Ross, I'll be equally direct, if the Empire is stranded here, we will require territory, resources, and autonomy. I have no interest in conquering the Federation, your democratic bureaucracy would be tedious to govern, but I also won't allow my people to become dependents or refugees. We'll negotiate a partition of space where Imperial vessels can operate independently. That's unacceptable, Kira said sharply. You can't just claim Federation territory. Major, with respect, we absolutely can, Reinhard interrupted, his ice-blue eyes hard. I command a fleet that could conquer this station and the surrounding sector before your reinforcements arrive. I'm not threatening you, I'm stating tactical reality. If we're stranded, cooperation is preferable to conflict, but I won't allow my people to be at your mercy. Reinhard, Curtius said quietly, the only person who could check the Admiral's autocratic impulses, perhaps we should focus on preventing that scenario rather than planning for it. Curtius is right, Yang interjected. And Admiral Ross, I should clarify that the Alliance's position differs from the Empire's. If we're stranded, we'd seek cooperative integration with the Federation. Our government structure is compatible with yours, we're both democracies, however flawed. We'd request autonomous territory, yes, but within a framework of mutual cooperation rather than partition. So the Alliance would work with us, but the Empire would demand independence, Sisko summarized. That's actually a problem, because your fleets arrive together. If one stays and one goes, we've separated you permanently. A heavy silence fell as everyone processed that implication. Julian spoke up hesitantly. Admirals, forgive me for asking, but, would that be so terrible? Your war has lasted 150 years. If you're separated by dimensional barriers, the killing stops. Maybe being stranded here is an opportunity for peace, not a disaster. Both Reinhard and Yang turned to look at the young man with expressions that were remarkably similar despite their ideological differences, the look of people who'd lived through horrors that couldn't be explained to those who'd never experienced them. Julian, Yang said gently, using the teaching tone he reserved for his ward, peace achieved through external force isn't peace, it's just interrupted war. If the Empire and Alliance are separated without resolving the fundamental conflicts that started the war, we've just postponed the violence, not ended it. Both our governments would spend every resource trying to reopen the dimensional breach so we could resume fighting. Is that really preferable to a negotiated settlement achieved through mutual exhaustion? And more practically, Reinhard added, my subordinates wouldn't accept permanent separation from Imperial territory. Admiral Reuenthal and Admiral Mittermeier are loyal to me personally, but thousands of officers and crew have families in the Empire. If I told them they'd never return home, I'd face mutiny within days. The same applies to the Alliance fleet, I assume. Yes, Frederica confirmed. Our personnel would not accept permanent exile, regardless of circumstances. Morale would collapse, command structure would fragment. Within weeks, we'd have not one Alliance fleet but dozens of independent groups pursuing their own agendas. Some might seek Federation integration. Others might turn to piracy. The situation would become uncontrollable. So we have 48 hours to either return you home or face the collapse of two massive military forces in Federation space, Admiral Ross summarized grimly. Dax, what do we need to stabilize the breach long enough for controlled passage? 3 things, Dax replied, pulling up technical specifications. First, massive energy input, more than DS9 can provide alone. Second, precise modulation of dimensional frequencies to resonate with both universes simultaneously. Third, a triggering mechanism that can initiate the stabilization process. Energy we can provide, Reinhard said immediately. Both fleets have fusion reactors that can be networked. Provide the specifications, and our engineering core can implement the power transfer systems. Dimensional frequency modulation is trickier, Dax admitted. We'd need to study the breach's properties extensively, map its harmonic resonances, and develop technology that can interface with both dimensional frameworks. That's weeks of work compressed into 2 days. What about your wormhole? Yang asked, studying the holographic display. You said it's a stable wormhole connecting 2 distant points. If wormholes manipulate spacetime, could we use its mechanisms as a template for stabilizing the dimensional breach? Dax's eyes widened. Admiral Yang, that's actually brilliant. The wormhole is maintained by the prophets, what we call the wormhole aliens, but its physical structure involves space-time manipulation that shares mathematical similarities with dimensional bridging. If we could apply the same principles. Who are these prophets? Reinhard asked suspiciously. Another political entity we need to negotiate with? They're non-corporeal beings who exist outside linear time, Sisko explained. They're worshipped by the Bajoran people as gods, but they're actually aliens with extraordinary abilities. They've appeared to me before, shown me visions of past and future events. If we could communicate with them. You want to ask your gods for help? Reinhard's tone suggested profound skepticism. Commander Sisko, I respect your strategic judgment, but I don't base military operations on religious appeals. They're not gods, Odo interjected. I've encountered them. They're powerful, non-linear, and utterly alien in their thinking. But they can be communicated with, especially by the emissary. He gestured to Sisko. The emissary? Yang asked. A long story, Sisko replied. Short version, the prophets designated me as their representative to linear beings. They've intervened in Bajoran affairs before. If the dimensional breach threatens the wormhole, their home, they might be willing to help stabilize it. Or they might destroy both fleets to eliminate the threat, Worf observed darkly. The prophets are not benevolent. They act according to their own incomprehensible purposes. Do we have an alternative? Kira asked. 48 hours isn't enough time to develop dimensional stabilization technology from scratch. If the prophets can help, we have to try. Yang lit another cigarette, exhaling smoke thoughtfully. Commander Sisko, I've spent my career fighting a war started by religious zealots. The Galactic Empire was originally founded on interpretations of ancient texts that justified autocracy. I'm deeply skeptical of involving supernatural entities in military planning. But... He glanced at the dimensional breach display. I'm also pragmatic enough to recognize when conventional solutions are insufficient. If your prophets can help, approach them. Just understand that both our fleets will maintain defensive postures in case your gods prove hostile. Agreed, Reinhard said. And Commander, I want one of my observers present when you communicate with these prophets. If they possess technology or knowledge that could be strategically valuable, the Empire has a right to that intelligence. I want an Alliance observer as well, Yang added. Sisko looked at Admiral Ross, who nodded slowly. It's unorthodox, but these are unorthodox circumstances. Commander, take whoever you need into the wormhole. But make it clear to the prophets that this situation affects more than just Bajorans or the Federation. If they refuse to help, then we'll find another way, Sisko finished. We always do. An hour later, the runabout Rio Grande approached the Bajoran wormhole carrying an unusual crew, Commander Sisko and Major Kira representing the Federation, Yang Wen-li representing the Alliance, and Siegfried Curtius representing the Empire. Reinhard had insisted on sending his most trusted friend rather than attending personally, a decision that spoke to both strategic caution and the profound trust between the two men. I've never met aliens who exist outside time, Curtius admitted as the wormhole began opening, space itself peeling apart like flower petals revealing brilliant light within. In our universe, we've encountered no sentient non-human species. If these prophets are truly as you describe them, they're unlike anything you've encountered, Kira said, her Bajoran faith evident in her tone. They see past, present, and future simultaneously. Communicating with them is disorienting. They don't understand linear causality the way we do. Which makes negotiation interesting, Yang observed, watching the wormhole's interior passage unfold around them, a tunnel of light and impossible geometry. How do you bargain with beings who already know the outcome of the conversation? You don't bargain, Sisko replied. You help them understand why certain outcomes matter to linear beings. The prophets don't comprehend consequences the way we do. They need context. The runabout entered the wormhole proper, and reality shifted. Suddenly they stood in a white void, not empty space, but the absence of space itself. Figures appeared, copies of themselves, copies of people from their pasts, all speaking with voices that came from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The Sisko, multiple voices said, using Sisko's form. You bring linear beings to our temple. Why? Because the temple is threatened, Sisko replied, recognizing the prophet's use of temple to describe the wormhole. A breach in dimensional barriers has formed near your home. If it remains unstable, it could damage or destroy the wormhole. I need your help to stabilize it. The prophet forms shifted, became versions of Yang and Curtius, studying themselves from outside. These beings are not of this continuum. They exist in contradictory states, here and elsewhere simultaneously. Their presence disturbs linear flow. Curtius stared at his own duplicate speaking in alien tones. This is deeply unsettling. You'll get used to it, Kira muttered. Or you won't. It doesn't get easier either way. Yang approached his own duplicate, studying it with the analytical detachment of someone who'd long since accepted that the universe was stranger than human comprehension allowed. You say we disturb linear flow. Does that mean our presence here is causing temporal instabilities? All linear beings disturb flow, the prophet Yang replied. But you disturb differently. Your linear paths originated in different universal constants. Bringing your past future present into our now creates dissonance. Can you fix it? Sisko asked. Can you help us stabilize the dimensional breach so these fleets can return to their own universe? The prophet forms multiplied, became crowds of Siskos, Yangs, Curtiuses, all speaking in overlapping temporal layers. Why must they return? Why not remain? Why not cease the aggressive linear persistence that defines your kind? Because millions of people in our universe are depending on us, Curtius said firmly. Because we have duties, loyalties, purposes that can't be abandoned just because circumstances changed. Would you abandon your temple if you were suddenly transported elsewhere? The prophet forms paused, an action that suggested they were processing concepts their nonlinear existence struggled to comprehend. Duty. Loyalty. Purpose. These are linear constructs we do not understand. Yet the Sisko has taught us they matter to your kind. They do, Sisko confirmed. These admirals and their crews didn't choose to come here. They want to go home. Helping them is the right thing to do. Right is linear morality, the prophets replied. We do not comprehend right-wrong binary construction. But we comprehend threat. The breach threatens our temple. Therefore, we will act. But action requires price. Yang stepped forward. What price? What do you want in exchange for stabilizing the breach? The prophet forms coalesced into a single version of Sisko, the one the prophets seemed to identify with most strongly. You must choose, Linear Admiral Yang Wen-li. We have observed your timeline across non-linear dimensions. You fight war you do not believe necessary. You kill because others command. You sacrifice because duty demands. We offer choice, return to that existence, or remain here where your war does not reach. Choose. Yang was silent for a long moment, his exhausted face suddenly showing the weight of 150 years of accumulated conflict. You're asking if I'd abandon my responsibilities to escape the war. We ask if you value duty or peace, the prophets replied. I value both, Yang said quietly. But I chose duty when I became a soldier. I can't unchoose it just because peace is offered. The Free Planets Alliance, flawed, corrupt, inefficient as it is, deserves someone to defend it. If I stay here, I abandon millions of people to a war I might have prevented or shortened. That's not peace. That's just running away. The prophet Yang tilted its head. You would choose suffering over contentment. This is illogical. Probably, Yang agreed. But it's human. We're defined by our choices, not our circumstances. If I chose comfort over duty, I wouldn't be Yang Wen-li anymore, I'd be someone who looks like him but isn't him. Does that make sense to nonlinear beings? No, the prophets admitted. But the Sisko has taught us that linear beings often choose incomprehensible paths. We will honor your choice. The breach will stabilize. Both fleets will return. But understand, we stabilize once only. If breach reopens, we will not intervene again. This is our price. You may return home, but you may never return here. Accepted, Curtius said immediately. On behalf of the Galactic Empire, we accept your terms. Accepted, Yang confirmed. On behalf of the Free Planets Alliance. The white void shifted, and suddenly they were back in the runabout, the wormhole's passage surrounding them as they emerged on the Alpha Quadrant side. No time had passed, or perhaps infinite time had passed, but the prophet's promise hung in the air like a contract written in the fabric of spacetime itself. Sisko piloted them back to DS9 in silence, each occupant processing what had just occurred in their own way. Finally, Curtius spoke. Commander Sisko, those beings, the prophets. They exist outside causality, yet they intervened in linear events because you asked them. That suggests extraordinary power constrained by equally extraordinary limitations. Do you trust them? I trust that they'll do what they said, Sisko replied. Whether their help comes in the form we expect, that's a different question. The prophets operate on principles we don't fully understand. But they've never actually lied to me. Comforting, Yang said dryly. We've just placed our fleet's fate in the hands of non-corporeal beings who don't understand human motivation but pinky promise to help anyway. What could possibly go wrong? Admiral Yang, Kira said, surprising everyone with the warmth in her tone, the prophets gave you a choice to stay. Why didn't you take it? You could have ended your war, found peace here in the Federation. Why choose to go back? Yang lit another cigarette, staring out at the stars through the runabout's viewport. Because duty isn't something you do when it's convenient, Major. It's what you do when everything else says you should run. I hate the war. I hate the killing. I hate that billions have died for ideological differences that could have been resolved through negotiation. But I also know that if I abandon my post, someone less competent or more fanatical will take my place. And that person might not try to minimize casualties. They might not look for peaceful solutions. They might just fight until everyone's dead. That's a terrible reason to keep fighting, Curtius observed. Yes, Yang agreed. But it's the only one I have. When they returned to DS9, both admirals were waiting, Reinhard with barely contained impatience, Yang's officers with visible relief. The news spread quickly, the prophets would stabilize the breach. Both fleets could return home. The question no one asked, but everyone thought, was whether returning to 150 years of war was victory or just postponed death. The next 18 hours transformed Deep Space Nine into something unprecedented, a neutral ground where two civilizations that had spent 150 years perfecting the art of killing each other instead worked toward mutual survival. Imperial and Alliance engineering teams coordinated with Starfleet personnel to construct the energy transfer network required for dimensional stabilization. Officers who would have shot each other on site 48 hours ago now shared technical specifications over coffee in Quark's bar. And on the command level, three strategic minds met to address the question everyone was carefully avoiding: what happens when the Dominion realizes their attack failed and returns in force? Sisko stood in DS9's war room, a space normally reserved for Starfleet tactical planning, studying holographic displays showing defensive deployments that now included thousands of foreign warships. Reinhard and Yang stood on opposite sides of the table, their respective command staffs arranged behind them like chess pieces on a board. The Dominion will return, Worf stated bluntly from his position. The Founders do not accept defeat. They will analyze our defensive response, adapt their tactics, and launch a larger assault. Agreed, Reinhard said immediately. Any competent strategic command would do the same. They probe defenses, assess capabilities, then return with overwhelming force designed to exploit identified weaknesses. The question is, when? My intelligence estimates 24 to 48 hours, Sisko replied. The Dominion needs time to assemble a larger fleet and brief commanders on what they learned from the first engagement. Weioun's clone will have resurrected by now with complete memory of the battle. The founders will want detailed analysis before committing more resources. Which gives us approximately 48 hours before they return, and we have approximately 48 hours before the dimensional breach stabilization is complete, Yang observed, lighting his perpetual cigarette. Interesting timing. It suggests the Dominion might attempt to interfere with the stabilization process. Dax pulled up sensor data from the Gamma Quadrant side of the wormhole. We've detected increased traffic on their side. Multiple fleet movements, command vessels repositioning. They're definitely planning something. Then we need to be ready, Kira said. Commander, what's our defensive status? Complicated, Sisko admitted. Strategically, we're in the strongest position DS9 has ever held. We have two massive fleets providing defense that makes us essentially invulnerable to conventional assault. But tactically, we have a problem. Both foreign fleets are preparing for departure. Admiral Yang, Admiral von Lohengramm, how long before your ships are ready for dimensional transit? The engineering crews estimate 36 hours to complete energy network installation, Frederica reported. After that, we'll need approximately 6 hours to charge the system and initiate the stabilization sequence. So 42 hours total, with minimal margin for error. The Empire's timeline is similar, Curtius confirmed. But Admiral Sisko is correct, we're preparing to leave, not to fight. If the Dominion attacks during the stabilization process, our ships will be in non-combat configurations. Weapons will be powered down to divert energy to the dimensional breach. We'll be vulnerable. Not entirely, Reinhard corrected. Even in non-combat configuration, both fleets maintain sufficient combat-ready vessels for defensive operations. But our offensive capability will be significantly reduced. We won't be able to achieve the kind of overwhelming victory we demonstrated in the first engagement. Yang studied the tactical display with his characteristic analytical detachment. The Dominion's smart. They'll wait until we've committed to the stabilization process, when our fleets are most vulnerable, and then attack. Their objective won't be to destroy us, it'll be to disrupt the energy transfer and prevent us from leaving. Keep us here permanently. Why would they want that? Julian asked from his position near Yang. Wouldn't the Dominion prefer to remove two powerful fleets from this universe? Not if they think they can control or exploit us, Yang replied. Julian, think strategically. The Dominion discovered two massive military forces from another dimension. If they can study our technology, interrogate our personnel, or, more ambitiously, force us into cooperation through circumstances, that's valuable intelligence and potential military assets. They'd try to trap you here intentionally. Sisko's expression darkened. Force you to choose between permanent exile or cooperation with the Dominion. It's what I would do, Reinhard said coldly. Faced with unknown powerful forces, prevent their departure and negotiate from a position of control. The Dominion's founders are ruthless, calculating, and long-term strategic thinkers. They absolutely would sacrifice short-term tactical advantage to gain permanent access to our military expertise. Odo shifted in his corner, liquid features somehow conveying grim agreement. The founders think in centuries, not years. If they believe they can acquire dimensional travel technology or military alliances with your civilizations, they'll invest whatever resources necessary. Keeping you here serves their long-term interests. Then we need to ensure the stabilization process is defended absolutely, Sisko concluded. Which means we need a defensive strategy that accounts for reduced fleet capabilities during the critical window. We need something more than defense, Yang said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Defense assumes the Dominion dictates engagement timing. We sit here, wait for them to attack, hope we can hold long enough to complete the stabilization. That's reactive strategy, it surrenders initiative to the enemy. What do you propose? Reinhard asked, his ice-blue eyes suddenly sharp with professional interest. We take the offensive, Yang replied. Before the Dominion can launch their prepared assault, we strike their staging facilities in the Gamma Quadrant. Destroy their forward bases, disrupt their command structure, force them to react to us instead of executing their planned operation. Silence greeted this proposal. Then Reinhard smiled, not warmly, but with the cold appreciation of one chess master recognizing another's brilliant move. A preemptive strike. Aggressive, risky, and strategically sound. If we destroy the Dominion's Gamma Quadrant infrastructure, they can't launch their assault on the dimensional stabilization. We buy time and eliminate the threat simultaneously. It's also incredibly dangerous, Kira protested. We'd be taking the fight to them in their own territory. The Gamma Quadrant is Dominion-controlled space. They have unlimited reinforcements, supply lines, defensive positions. It could be a slaughter. Only if we commit incorrectly, Yang replied. We don't invade. We don't occupy. We execute a rapid strike against strategic targets, inflict maximum damage to their offensive capabilities, and withdraw before they can coordinate effective response. Hit hard, hit fast, and leave before they understand what happened. Worf leaned forward, his warrior instincts clearly engaged. A raid, not a campaign. We would need precise intelligence on Dominion facilities, strike teams capable of operating independently, and fleet elements to provide extraction support. We have all three, Reinhard said. Both our fleets include specialized commando units trained for ship-to-ship combat and facility assault. Your Defiant-class vessels can penetrate deep into enemy territory with cloaking technology. And Admiral Yang and I, he glanced across the table at his eternal enemy, have extensive experience planning coordinated deep strike operations. You've raided each other's territory for 150 years, Sisko realized. Both of you have doctrines for attacking heavily defended positions with limited forces. Exactly, Yang confirmed. The Alliance has survived through asymmetric warfare, hitting Imperial supply lines, command stations, isolated fleet elements. We've learned how to punch above our weight because we've never had numerical superiority. This situation is tactically similar. We need to damage an enemy with superior territorial advantages using precision strikes. And the Empire has perfected decisive assault doctrine, Reinhard added. Concentration of overwhelming force at critical strategic points. If we combine Alliance asymmetric tactics with Imperial decisive power. He trailed off, studying the holographic display of Dominion space with visible calculation. You want to work together, Sisko said slowly. Not just defend the station together, actively cooperate on an offensive operation. The Empire and Alliance, planning a joint military operation for the first time in 150 years. The situation demands it, Reinhard replied. And tactically, Admiral Yang and I complement each other. My strength is direct assault, overwhelming force applied with precision. His strength is indirect warfare, finding vulnerabilities and exploiting them creatively. Together. He looked at Yang. We would be formidable. Yang met Reinhard's gaze across the table, 150 years of war, billions of dead, fundamentally opposed ideologies separating them. And yet, in this moment, mutual professional respect bridged that gulf. We would, Yang agreed quietly. Though I suspect if we actually succeed at working together, our respective governments will be horrified. The entire political structure of our universe is built on Empire-Alliance antagonism. If we demonstrate we can cooperate effectively, we undermine the justification for the war's continuation, Reinhard finished. Which is why, when we return, neither of us will mention this cooperation in our official reports. Agreed? Agreed, Yang said. Let history record that we were forced to cooperate by circumstances, not that we chose to. Our politicians can continue their ideological posturing while we quietly acknowledge that sometimes, pragmatism transcends principle. Sisko watched this exchange with something approaching awe. Two legendary commanders, separated by ideology and history, finding common ground through shared tactical understanding. It was the kind of moment that defined history, not the grand speeches or formal treaties, but the quiet recognition between professionals that they were more similar than different. "Then we have a plan," Sisko said. "We launch a preemptive strike against Dominion facilities in the Gamma Quadrant while maintaining defensive forces here at DS9. The operation needs to achieve 3 objectives: destroy the Dominion's offensive capabilities, buy time for dimensional stabilization, and extract our forces before enemy reinforcements arrive." "Admirals, you'll co-command the operation?" "No," both Reinhard and Yang said simultaneously, then glared at each other again for the unintended synchronization that kept happening. "We command our own fleets," Reinhard clarified. "Unified command structure would be inefficient. Our officers aren't trained to follow the other side's doctrine. Instead, we'll coordinate operations. I'll command the Imperial Strike Force, Yang will command the Alliance element, and we'll synchronize our attacks to achieve mutual objectives." "Like a dance," Yang added, stubbing out his cigarette. "Two partners moving independently but in rhythm. It's actually more effective than unified command in this situation. We can each adapt our tactics independently while maintaining strategic coordination." "Who provides overall strategic direction?" Worf asked. "If neither of you commands the other, who ensures coordination?" Reinhard and Yang exchanged glances. "Commander Sisko," Reinhard said. "As the Federation commander whose territory we're defending, and the person who negotiated with the prophets on our behalf. Neither Yang nor I will accept subordination to the other, but we can both accept coordination through a neutral third party." "You want me to coordinate 2 legendary military geniuses from another universe," Sisko said flatly. "Admirals, I'm honored by the confidence, but I've never commanded fleets of this scale. I'm a station commander, not a fleet admiral." "You're also someone who thinks like Yang and I do," Reinhard replied. "I've watched you work, Commander. You're pragmatic, adaptive, willing to make hard choices. Most importantly, you understand that war is about achieving objectives, not just winning battles. That's the mindset we need for coordination." "And frankly," Yang added with tired humor, "you're the only person both Reinhard and I will listen to. Our respective staffs would mutiny if we tried to take orders from each other. But a Federation officer coordinating independent operations? That's politically acceptable to both sides." Sisko looked at Admiral Ross on the view screen. The Starfleet Admiral had been silent throughout this discussion, but now he nodded slowly. "Commander, this is your call. But understand, if this operation fails, you'll be responsible for catastrophic losses to forces that aren't even under Federation command. The political ramifications will be my problem," Sisko finished. "Admiral Ross, respectfully, we don't have time for political considerations. The Dominion is preparing to attack, and we have one chance to prevent it. I'll take responsibility for the outcome, success or failure." "Spoken like a true commander," Reinhard said approvingly. "Then it's decided. Commander Sisko coordinates overall strategy. Admiral Yang and I command our respective strike forces. We'll need intelligence on Dominion facilities, target identification, defensive capabilities, strategic value." "Odo and I can provide that," Kira said. "We've been gathering intelligence on Gamma Quadrant operations for months. There are 3 primary facilities that, if destroyed, would cripple the Dominion's near-term offensive capabilities." She pulled up holographic displays showing 3 targets. First, the Vandros shipyard complex. They're constructing new attack ships there. If we destroy it, we eliminate a significant portion of their naval construction capacity. Second, the Jem'Hadar breeding facility on Kuril Prime. Jem'Hadar soldiers are grown to maturity in weeks, not years. Destroying this facility disrupts their troop replacement pipeline. Third, a Vorta cloning station on Dragar. The Vorta coordinate Dominion military operations. If we eliminate their cloning facilities, we kill their institutional knowledge and command continuity. They'll lose experienced commanders and have to rebuild from scratch. Walter von Schonkopp studied the targets with professional interest. 3 targets, significant strategic value, undoubtedly heavily defended. This is a complex operation. We'll need specialized assault teams for ground operations, fleet elements for orbital support, and perfect timing to hit all 3 simultaneously, otherwise the Dominion will reinforce whichever target we hit first. We have the forces, Reinhard said. Admiral Reinhard will command the assault on Vandross shipyard. He excels at fleet-to-fleet combat and orbital bombardment. Admiral Mittermeier takes the Jem'Hadar facility. His rapid assault doctrine is perfect for ground operations. I'll personally command the strike on the Vorta cloning station. The Alliance will mirror your deployment, Yang said. I'll take the cloning station with you. We can coordinate our approach and ensure the most critical target is destroyed. Commodore Attenborough will support Reinhard at the shipyard. Walter, he looked at von Schonkopp, the breeding facility is yours. Take your Rosen-Ritters and show the Jem'Hadar that manufactured soldiers aren't the only ones who can fight with fanatical dedication. With pleasure, Schonkopp replied, his scarred face splitting into a predatory grin. The Defiant will accompany the strike on the cloning station, Sisko decided. We'll provide tactical support and emergency extraction if things go wrong. Worf, prepare the ship for deep penetration operations. Major Kira, you'll command DS9's defenses during our absence. Commander, Kira protested, you're going personally. If something happens to you. Then Lieutenant Dax assumes command, Sisko interrupted. Major, I need to be there to coordinate operations in real time. This isn't the kind of mission you can manage from a command center 70,000 light-years away. Dax's expression suggested she wanted to argue, but she recognized the tactical necessity. Benjamin, at least take adequate security. If the operation goes bad and you're captured, then the Dominion gets a Federation commander who knows too much, Sisko acknowledged. I'm aware of the risks. But this operation is too important to delegate. We either succeed in disrupting Dominion capabilities, or we fail and watch them prevent our allies from returning home. Those are the stakes. Reinhard stood, his aristocratic bearing somehow making the gesture a formal declaration. Then we have our plan. 48 hours from now, 3 strike forces will simultaneously assault Dominion strategic facilities in Gamma Quadrant. We destroy their offensive capacity, withdraw before reinforcements arrive, and return to DS9 in time to complete the dimensional stabilization. And if the Dominion tries to stop us? Julian asked quietly. Young answered with the tired pragmatism of someone who'd spent decades answering that same question. Then we fight, Julian. We fight with everything we have, and we hope that 150 years of learning how to kill each other has taught us enough about warfare to survive one more battle against a different enemy. The meeting adjourned, officers dispersing to their respective commands to begin preparation. But as Young moved toward the door, Reinhard's voice stopped him. Young. The Alliance Admiral turned, meeting Reinhard's ice-blue gaze. When this is over, Reinhard said quietly, pitched so only Young could hear, when we've both returned to our universe and resumed our war. I want you to know that I respect you. Not as an enemy. Not as an obstacle to be overcome. But as a worthy opponent whose tactical genius has shaped me into a better commander. Young was silent for a moment, processing this admission from someone who'd spent decades trying to kill him and everyone under his command. Reinhard, Young replied equally quietly, when we return, I'll do everything in my power to stop your conquest of the Alliance. I'll fight you with every trick, every tactic, every desperate strategy one can devise. Not because I hate you, I don't. But because I believe democracy, flawed as it is worth defending against even benevolent autocracy. I know, Reinhard said. That's why you're worth fighting. An enemy who didn't believe in their cause would be easy to defeat. An enemy who believes absolutely. He trailed off. That's the war worth winning. They stood there for a moment, 2 legendary commanders separated by ideology but connected by mutual understanding, before Young nodded once and left. Courteous approached Reinhard as Yang departed. Was that wise? Showing respect to the enemy? Courteous, Reinhard replied, watching Yang's retreating form. Yang Wen-li is not just an enemy. He's the standard by which I measure my own strategic competence. When I defeat him, and I will, eventually, it will be my greatest victory precisely because he's the most worthy opponent I've ever faced. In the corridor, Julian caught up to Yang. Admiral, what did Lord von Lohengramm say to you? Yang lit another cigarette, his expression unreadable. He told me what I already knew, Julian. That respect and enmity aren't mutually exclusive. That you can acknowledge someone's worth while still working toward their destruction. It's a very aristocratic philosophy, honor your enemy before you kill them. And do you honor him? Julian asked. Yang exhaled smoke, considering. I hate what Reinhard represents, autocracy, concentration of power, rule by genius rather than consent of the governed. But I respect his competence, his dedication to his people, and his genuine belief that he's building something better. Does that make him less dangerous? No. If anything, it makes him more dangerous, because he's not a tyrant who can be easily opposed. He's a reformer who might actually build a functional autocracy. And that's terrifying in its own way. They walked toward the docking bay where Yang's shuttle waited, silent with their own thoughts about enemies who became allies, allies who would become enemies again, and the strange mathematics of war that demanded respect even as it required violence. In 48 hours, 3 strike forces would assault the Dominion's heart. The question wasn't whether they'd succeed. The question was what they'd learn about themselves in the attempt. The Gamma Quadrant had always represented the unknown for the Federation, 70,000 light-years of unexplored space accessed only through the miraculous Bajoran wormhole. For the Dominion, it was home territory, a vast empire where the founders will manifest it through Vorta administrators and Jem'Hadar soldiers. And now, for the first time in the Dominion War, that home territory was about to be violated by an invasion force unlike anything the founders had ever encountered. The strike fleet assembled at the wormhole's Alpha Quadrant entrance like ancient warriors preparing for a raid into enemy lands. 3 groups, each commanded by legendary tacticians, each targeting facilities that would cripple Dominion offensive capabilities. Reinhard stood on Brunhild's bridge, his white uniform immaculate despite the tension permeating every deck. Around his flagship, Imperial vessels moved with geometric precision, heavy cruisers, destroyers, troop transports carrying assault marines trained for boarding actions and facility seizure. His tactical display showed Yang's Hyperion taking position alongside, the Alliance flagship battered but operational, its crew preparing for what might be their final battle before returning home. Admiral, his chief of staff reported, all strike groups report ready. Admiral Reuenthal's fleet is in position for the shipyard assault. Admiral Mittermeier confirms readiness for the breeding facility operation. We await your order to proceed. Reinhard studied the tactical display one final time, running probability calculations through his strategic mind. 3 targets, 3 fleets, perfect coordination required. Any failure would alert the Dominion and allow them to reinforce the remaining objectives. Success demanded simultaneous execution with surgical precision. Open a channel to Admiral Yang and Commander Sisko, Reinhard ordered. All strike commanders on the line. The view screen split into multiple feeds, Yang on Hyperion looking exhausted but focused, Sisko on the Defiant with his characteristic determined expression, Reuenthal's scarred aristocratic features, Mittermeier's intense energy, and Attenborough's easy confidence. Final coordination, Reinhard said without preamble. We enter the wormhole in 3 minutes. Transit time is approximately 1 minute. We emerge in Dominion space and immediately divide into 3 strike groups. From emergence to target engagement should take no more than 15 minutes, speed is essential. Hit hard, extract fast, and regroup at the rendezvous coordinates before Dominion reinforcements arrive. Any questions? Rules of engagement? Attenborough asked. Do we show mercy to Dominion forces that surrender? We show efficiency, Reinhard replied coldly. This is a military operation, not a conquest. Destroy strategic targets, eliminate resistance, and withdraw. Prisoners slow extraction. If Dominion forces surrender and don't interfere with mission objectives, ignore them. If they resist, eliminate them. That's brutal, Sisko said quietly. That's warfare, Reinhard countered. Commander, if you're uncomfortable with military necessity, you shouldn't have agreed to coordinate the operation. We don't have time for ethical debates once combat begins. I didn't say I disagreed, Sisko replied. I said it was brutal. There's a difference. Proceed with your plan, Admiral. Yang spoke up, his voice carrying across the channel with tired authority. Reinhard's right about efficiency, but let's remember why we're here. We're buying time for our people to go home, not starting a war of extermination. Destroy the facilities, disable the Dominion's offensive capacity, but don't slaughter unnecessarily. We're raiders, not conquerors. Agreed, Mittermeier said, his loyalty to Reinhard evident but his tactical sense recognizing Yang's wisdom. Precision over brutality. We hit the targets and leave. Anything else wastes time we don't have. 2 minutes to insertion, Curtius reported from his station. All ships, final systems check. This is the last communication window before we go dark. The channel fell silent as each commander made final preparations. On Brunhild, Reinhard stood before his command throne, hands clasped behind his back, his golden hair catching the bridge lights. He looked every inch the legendary golden brat, young, beautiful, absolutely confident in his tactical genius. On Hyperion, Yang stubbed out his cigarette and immediately lit another, his rumpled uniform and disheveled appearance contrasting sharply with Reinhard's aristocratic perfection. He slouched in his command chair like a man who'd rather be anywhere else, yet his eyes tracked fleet dispositions with the precision of a master strategist. 2 commanders, 2 philosophies, 1 mission. All ships, Sisko's voice came over the combined channel from the Defiant, this is the last chance to abort. Once we cross the wormhole, we're committed. We'll be in Dominion space, 70,000 light-years from reinforcement, facing an enemy on their home territory. If anyone has concerns, voice them now. Silence greeted his offer. No one spoke. No one hesitated. Then let's show the Dominion, Sisko continued, what happens when they threaten people who've been fighting impossible wars for longer than the Federation has existed. All ships, enter the wormhole. Operation commence. The massive strike fleet surged forward, thousands of warships from 3 different civilizations entering the Bajoran wormhole simultaneously. The passage that normally accommodated individual vessels or small groups now carried an armada whose presence made the wormhole itself pulse with stressed energy. The prophets watched, their nonlinear consciousness observing past, present, future simultaneously, but they did not interfere. Then Sisko had asked for help, and they had promised. These linear beings would have their chance to return home. Whether they survived to take it was their own concern. The wormhole exit into the Gamma Quadrant blazed with light as the strike fleet emerged. Dominion sensor stations detected them immediately, alarm signals propagated across subspace networks, alerting Vorta commanders and founder overseers that the impossible had occurred, the enemy had brought the war to the Dominion's home. The fleet divided instantly, each strike group accelerating toward their designated targets with the coordination of forces that had drilled this maneuver despite never having worked together before. Reinhard's tactical genius met Yang's adaptive brilliance met Starfleet's technological sophistication, and the result was an invasion force moving with lethal elegance. Reuenthal's force, Imperial heavy cruiser supported by Alliance destroyers and 2 Federation patrol ships, burned toward the Vandros shipyard complex at maximum acceleration. The shipyard hung in orbit around a gas giant, massive construction berths visible even at distance, dozens of Dominion attack ships in various stages of completion. Shipmaster Reuenthal to all ships, the scarred admiral's voice carried absolute authority. Standard assault pattern, Imperial vessels engage orbital defense platforms, Alliance destroyers provide anti-fighter screen, Federation ships target the shipyard's reactor complex with photon torpedoes. Execution on my mark, mark. The Imperial cruisers opened fire with massed beam weapons, neutron beams and particle cannons converging on defense platforms that had been designed to ward off single-ship raids, not fleet-level assaults. Shields collapsed under concentrated fire. Platforms exploded in sequence as reactor containments failed. Within 90 seconds, the shipyard's defensive perimeter ceased to exist. Alliance destroyers engaged the Jem'Hadar fighter wings that scrambled from the shipyard's internal bays. Unlike the rigid formations Federation pilots used, Alliance tactics emphasized fluid coordination, ships weaving through each other's fire patterns, creating interlocking defensive zones that caught Jem'Hadar pilots in devastating crossfires. The manufactured soldiers fought with suicidal dedication, but desperation couldn't overcome tactical superiority. Alliance missile salvos shredded fighter squadrons, nuclear detonations creating expanding spheres of destruction. The Federation patrol ships, small, agile, equipped with technology the Dominion had never encountered, slipped through the chaos and launched precision photon torpedo strikes against the shipyard's central reactor complex. The torpedoes' matter-antimatter warheads detonated inside critical infrastructure. The entire facility convulsed as power systems failed and structural supports collapsed. Shipyard reactors critical, Attenborough reported from his Alliance destroyer. Recommend immediate withdrawal, facility will achieve catastrophic failure in approximately 3 minutes. All ships, execute extraction, Reuenthal ordered. Reform at Rally Point Gamma. Mission objective achieved. The strike force withdrew as the Vandros shipyard complex tore itself apart, construction berths fragmenting, incomplete attack ships tumbling into the gas giant's gravity well, years of Dominion naval construction destroyed in less than 6 minutes. Target 1, eliminated. At Kuril Prime, Mittermeier's force faced different challenges. The Jem'Hadar breeding facility wasn't orbital infrastructure, it was a planetary complex defended by thousands of soldiers who didn't know fear and didn't understand surrender. Ground assault required, Mittermeier reported to his fleet. Imperial assault marines will establish landing zones. Alliance Rosen Ritters will penetrate facility defenses. Our objective is the cloning chambers themselves, destroy those, and we've accomplished mission parameters. The Imperial troop transports descended through Kuril Prime's atmosphere under covering fire from orbital cruisers. Jem'Hadar ground forces met them with immediate, fanatical resistance, portable plasma cannons, anti-ship weapons, suicide charges with demolition explosives. The Imperial Marines, trained in the brutal doctrine of the Galactic Empire, responded with overwhelming firepower. Beam weapons cleared landing zones, armored infantry established perimeters, and assault teams pushed toward the facility's central complex. Walter von Schonkopp led his Rosen Ritter Regiment, elite Alliance commandos who'd spent decades raiding Imperial facilities, into the facility's depths. Where Imperial Marines used overwhelming force, the Rosen Ritters used precision and speed. They bypassed hardpoints, exploited gaps in Jem'Hadar defensive lines, and struck directly at critical systems. Cloning chambers located, Schonkopp reported, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. Setting demolition charges now. All units, prepare for facility collapse and immediate extraction. The charges detonated in sequence, shaped explosives designed to rupture the cloning chamber's containment systems. Jem'Hadar soldiers in various stages of accelerated growth died instantly as their artificial wombs failed. The facility's central structure collapsed, burying cloning technology the Dominion had spent decades perfecting. Objective achieved, Mittermeier confirmed. All forces, return to transports. Execute emergency extraction, Dominion reinforcements detected inbound. The Imperial and Alliance forces withdrew under fire, their troop transports launching from Kuril Prime's surface as Dominion reinforcement fleets began arriving in system. But by then, the damage was done. Target 2, eliminated. At the Vorta cloning station on Dragar, Reinhard and Yang faced the most complex objective. Unlike military facilities, the cloning station was housed in a civilian population center, deliberately positioned among non-combatants to deter orbital bombardment. Destroying it required surgical precision, not overwhelming force. Commander Sisko, Reinhard said over the tactical channel, "Your Defiant has precision targeting capabilities our vessels lack. Can you eliminate the cloning facility without significant collateral damage to surrounding civilian structures?" Sisko studied the Defiant's targeting sensors, his command instincts warring with his humanitarian concerns. The cloning facility was nestled among residential towers, administrative buildings, and what appeared to be civilian infrastructure. A missed shot would kill thousands of non-combatants. "I can do it," Sisko confirmed. "But I need your fleets to clear the orbital approach and suppress defensive fire. I'll make one pass, hit the facility with quantum torpedoes, and extract immediately." "Agreed," Yang said. "Alliance forces will provide anti-fighter screen. Reinhard, your ships handle the defense platforms." "Already targeting them," Reinhard replied, watching as his tactical officers designated firing solutions. "Brunhild and escort squadrons will eliminate orbital defenses in sequence. Commander Sisko, you'll have a 30-second window. Use it." The combined fleet executed the plan with choreographed precision. Imperial beam weapons hammered orbital platforms, Yang's forces engaged Jem'Hadar fighters, and the Defiant, small, fast, equipped with Federation targeting technology that bordered on miraculous, dove through the defensive fire toward the planet's surface. Targeting scanners locked, Dax reported from the Defiant science station. Confirmed the cloning facility's location. "Benjamin, the quantum torpedoes will need to penetrate 60 meters of reinforced structure. Precision at this level." "I know," Sisko said, his hands steady on the helm controls. "Fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." Two quantum torpedoes launched from the Defiant's forward tubes, their trajectory calculated by computers operating at the edge of their processing capacity. The weapons descended through Dragar's atmosphere, adjusted course with micro-corrections, and struck the cloning facility with pinpoint accuracy. The facility exploded from within, its internal structure collapsing while surrounding buildings remained intact. Vorta clones in various stages of maturation died instantly, their genetic templates corrupted beyond recovery. The Dominion's institutional memory, the carefully preserved personalities and knowledge of their administrative caste, vanished in nuclear fire. Direct hit, Worf confirmed. Cloning facility destroyed. Collateral damage minimal, estimates suggest fewer than 200 civilian casualties in adjacent structures. 200 people just died, Sisko said quietly. 200 versus 2 million if we'd used orbital bombardment, Reinhard replied without sympathy. "This is war, Commander. Celebrate the precision, mourn the necessity, but don't hesitate over what had to be done." "Dominion reinforcements arriving," Yang interrupted. "Multiple fleet elements converging on our position. All strike groups, execute extraction protocols. Return to rally point." Mission accomplished. The three strike forces withdrew from their respective targets, regrouping at predetermined coordinates in deep space between the targets and the wormhole. Dominion pursuit forces arrived to find only debris and the aftermath of devastation, 3 critical facilities destroyed, their offensive capabilities crippled, and the enemy already gone. On Brunhild's bridge, Reinhard allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. "Casualty reports." "Minimal," Curtius replied. 17 vessels damaged, 3 destroyers lost, approximately 2,000 personnel casualties across all forces. Dominion casualties estimated in the tens of thousands. The strategic exchange ratio is overwhelmingly in our favor. Commander Sisko, Reinhard said over the fleet channel, tactical assessment. "Did we achieve mission objectives?" "All 3 facilities destroyed," Sisko confirmed, though his voice carried weight. "Dominion offensive capacity significantly reduced. They'll need months to rebuild construction capability, troop production, and command infrastructure." You bought the time you needed. We bought it, Yang corrected. This was coordinated effort, Commander. You provided targeting precision the Empire and Alliance couldn't match. Without the Defiant surgical strike, we'd have been forced to accept massive civilian casualties. You should acknowledge your contribution. I acknowledge we destroyed what we came to destroy, Sisko said. Whether that makes it right is a question I'll be asking myself for a long time. That's why you're not a tyrant, Yang replied. Tyrants don't question. Reinhard and we've made so many terrible decisions for strategic necessity that we've learned to live with the weight. You haven't. Hold on to that doubt, Commander. It means you're still human. Philosophical discussions later, Reinhard interrupted. All ships, return to the wormhole. We have 36 hours before the dimensional stabilization sequence begins. Time to ensure no Dominion interference prevents our departure. The strike fleet withdrew through the wormhole, leaving the Gamma Quadrant burning behind them. On Founder's homeworld, deep in Dominion territory, the female changeling received reports of the raid with liquid features somehow conveying rage. They violated our space, she said to the assembled Vorta and Jem'Hadar commanders. Destroyed facilities that took years to construct. And they did it with fleets we've never encountered, ships from beyond our universe, commanded by strategists whose tactics our database doesn't recognize. Should we pursue? A Vorta administrator asked nervously. No, the female changeling replied. They want us to pursue. They want us to commit forces to revenge while they complete whatever operation brought them here. Instead, we wait. We analyze. We learn. And when they reveal their true objective. Her form shifted, flowing into configurations that suggested hunger. We strike when they're vulnerable. When they think they've won. That's when solids are weakest, in the moment of their triumph. She was right. In 36 hours, when both foreign fleets committed to dimensional stabilization, they would be at their most vulnerable. And the Dominion would be ready. Deep Space Nine hummed with controlled urgency as engineering teams from 3 civilizations worked in synchronized chaos to complete the dimensional stabilization network. The station's promenade, normally filled with traders, travelers, and the occasional criminal enterprise run by Quark, had been converted into a massive technical operations center. Imperial engineers in black uniforms consulted with Alliance technicians in rumpled fatigues while Starfleet personnel coordinated the integration of technologies that shouldn't theoretically be compatible. Commander Sisko stood in operations watching the preparations with growing concern. Through the station's viewports, thousands of warships had positioned themselves in precise formations around DS9 and the dimensional breach. Energy transfer conduits, hastily constructed but functional, connected both fleets to the station's power grid, creating a network that would channel massive energy output into the breach's stabilization. Status report, Sisko ordered, moving to Dax's science station. We're on schedule, Dax replied, though her expression suggested the schedule was tighter than anyone preferred. The energy network is complete. Both fleets report their reactors are ready for synchronized discharge. The Prophet's modifications to the dimensional breach are holding, it's still contracting, but at a controlled rate. When we initiate the stabilization sequence, we'll have approximately 30 minutes to channel energy into the breach, force it into resonance with both dimensional frameworks, and create a stable passage for fleet transit. 30 minutes, Sisko repeated. During which time both fleets will be completely vulnerable, weapons offline, shields minimal, all power diverted to the dimensional stabilization. Exactly, Dax confirmed. If the Dominion attacks during that window, we'll be defenseless, Kira finished, moving to join them. Commander, I know the raid bought us time, but the Dominion isn't going to just let us complete this operation. They're planning something. I know, Sisko said quietly. He activated the communication system. Sisko to Admirals von Lohengramm and Yang Wen-li, report to operations for final coordination. Both admirals arrived within minutes, their command staffs in tow. Reinhard looked as immaculate as ever despite 3 days of continuous operations, while Yang appeared to be operating on caffeine and willpower, his uniform somehow even more rumpled than usual. "Commander," Reinhard said without preamble, "my fleet is ready to begin the stabilization sequence. All vessels have completed their preparations. We await your order to proceed." "As is the Alliance," Yang confirmed, lighting what had to be his 100th cigarette of the day. "Though I should mention our engineering crews are reporting significant stress on older vessels. When we divert power to the dimensional network, some ships may experience cascading system failures. It's a calculated risk." "How calculated?" Sisko asked. "Approximately 8% of our fleet might suffer catastrophic power system collapse during the 30-minute window," Yang admitted. "That's roughly 200 vessels and potentially 20,000 crew. We're implementing emergency protocols, but there's only so much we can do with equipment that's been at war for 150 years. The Empire's vessels are more reliable," Reinhard said, though without the usual aristocratic condescension. "Our casualties from system failure should be under 2%. But Yang's concern is valid. When we commit to this operation, we're accepting significant risk beyond just Dominion interference. Then we need contingency planning," Sisko said. "Dax, can we stage the energy discharge? Start with the most reliable vessels and add others gradually?" "No," Dax replied. "The dimensional stabilization requires simultaneous energy input across all connected nodes. If we try to stage it, the resonance patterns will be wrong and the breach will collapse catastrophically, potentially creating a dimensional shockwave that would destroy everything within a light-year radius. So it's all or nothing," Kira summarized. "We commit everything simultaneously and hope nothing goes wrong for 30 minutes. Essentially," Dax confirmed. Odo materialized from his corner, his liquid features conveying the particular concern that came from understanding Dominion psychology. "Commander, we need to address the obvious threat. The Dominion knows we're here. They know we've been preparing something. They have to assume we're attempting to return to our own universe, which means they'll try to stop us. The question is how," Worf added. "Our raid destroyed their immediate offensive capability. They need time to assemble a fleet large enough to threaten our defensive forces. My estimates suggest they cannot mount a significant assault for at least 48 hours. Unless they don't need a fleet," Yang said quietly, his exhausted eyes suddenly sharp. "Odo, you understand the Founders better than anyone. If you were commanding Dominion forces and wanted to disrupt this operation without committing a massive fleet, what would you do?" Odo's features shifted, considering. "I'd use subspace weapons. The same technology that likely created the dimensional breach in the first place. The Dominion has been experimenting with subspace distortion fields. They're unstable, unpredictable, but if deployed correctly, they could disrupt your energy network without requiring direct military engagement. A weapon that attacks infrastructure rather than ships," Reinhard said, his tactical mind immediately grasping the implications. "Intelligent. Efficient. It bypasses our numerical superiority and targets our operational vulnerability. Can we defend against subspace weapons?" Sisko asked Dax. "Not easily," Dax admitted. "Subspace distortions propagate faster than light. We wouldn't detect them until they were already affecting our systems. And if they disrupt the dimensional stabilization mid-sequence." She trailed off, the implications too dire to vocalize. "Then we need early warning," Yang said. "We need to know the moment the Dominion deploys subspace weapons so we can abort the sequence or adapt our approach." "We need reconnaissance," Reinhard corrected. "Ships positioned in Gamma Quadrant space that can detect Dominion preparations and provide advance warning. A sacrificial monitoring force." Silence greeted this suggestion. "You're proposing we send ships through the wormhole to watch for Dominion activity," Kira said slowly. "Ships that might not be able to withdraw before the dimensional stabilization begins, that might be stranded permanently in the Gamma Quadrant if something goes wrong." "Yes," Reinhard replied without hesitation. "It's a sacrifice mission. Volunteers only, minimal force, maximum sensor capability. They monitor Dominion movements and transmit warnings. When the stabilization sequence begins, they attempt extraction. If they can't make it back. He left the sentence unfinished. That's asking people to potentially sacrifice their chance to go home, Sisko said. It's asking soldiers to do what soldiers do, Reinhard countered. Accept risk for mission success. Commander, I'll provide Imperial volunteers. Yang. The Alliance will contribute as well, Yang confirmed, though his expression showed he hated the necessity. I'll ask for volunteers from my most experienced reconnaissance crews. People who understand the risks and choose to accept them. I'll send the Defiant, Sisko said. Commander, no, Kira protested. If the Defiant is stranded in the Gamma Quadrant. Then I'll be stranded with my ship, Sisko interrupted. Major, the Defiant has the best sensors, the best speed, and the best chance of both detecting Dominion preparations and extracting successfully. This is my responsibility. Benjamin, Dax said quietly, using his first name in violation of protocol, if you're captured by the Dominion, they'll learn everything you know about the Federation, about our allies' capabilities, about dimensional transit technology. The intelligence damage would be catastrophic. I know, Sisko replied. Which is why I'll make sure I'm not captured. Dax, you'll command DS-9 during the operation. If the stabilization fails and I don't return, your orders are to evacuate the station and withdraw to Federation space. Don't attempt rescue, you won't have the forces or the time. I don't like this, Kira said flatly. Neither do I, Sisko admitted. But we're out of good options. We need intelligence on Dominion movements, and the Defiant is our best asset for that mission. Worf, assemble a minimal crew, volunteers only, people who understand they might not make it back. I volunteer, Worf said immediately. As do Chief O'Brien and Dr. Bashir. We discussed this possibility already. Of course you did, Sisko said with a slight smile. Very well. Defiant departs in 2 hours. The stabilization sequence begins in 6 hours. That gives us a 4-hour window to assess Dominion activity and make final adjustments. And if the Dominion deploys subspace weapons during those 4 hours? Frederica asked, her logistics mind identifying the timing vulnerability. Then we abort, adapt, and try again, Yang replied. Or we accept that we're permanently stranded here and begin negotiating long-term integration with the Federation. Neither option is pleasant, but they're both preferable to having our fleets torn apart by dimensional instabilities while we're defenseless. Reinhard stood, his aristocratic bearing somehow making the gesture a formal declaration. Then we understand the parameters. Reconnaissance force departs in 2 hours. Stabilization sequence begins in 6 hours. 30-minute vulnerability window during which we either succeed in returning home or fail catastrophically. Are there any other concerns we need to address? Curtius spoke up, his loyalty to Reinhard evident but his pragmatism overriding it. Admiral, what happens if the stabilization succeeds but both fleets can't transit simultaneously? If we have to prioritize, which civilization goes first? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. We transit simultaneously, Reinhard said firmly. Both fleets committed resources to this operation. Both fleets accepted risks. We don't establish precedents by prioritizing one over the other, that creates political complications when we return to our war. Agreed, Yang said. If only one fleet can transit, neither fleet transits. We succeed together or we fail together. It's the only fair arrangement. Fairness is a luxury in military operations, Reinhard observed. And yet you're agreeing to it anyway, Yang replied with tired amusement. Reinhard, for all your autocratic philosophy, you have a surprisingly well-developed sense of honor. It's almost endearing. Don't confuse honor with strategic calculation, Reinhard shot back. If I prioritized Imperial transit over Alliance transit, it would undermine our tentative cooperation and potentially spark conflict during the most vulnerable phase of the operation. I'm being pragmatic, not honorable. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Yang said, stubbing out his cigarette. The meeting dispersed, officers returning to their commands for final preparations. But as the room emptied, Sisko found himself standing at the viewport staring at the dimensional breach, a wound in reality that represented hope for thousands of refugees from another universe and potential disaster for his own. Benjamin, Dax said quietly, approaching him. You don't have to do this. We can send someone else on the Defiant. You're too valuable to risk on a reconnaissance mission. I'm the one who coordinated this entire operation, Sisko replied. I'm the one who negotiated with the Prophets, who authorized the Gamma Quadrant raid, who agreed to help these fleets return home. If someone's going to risk being stranded to ensure mission success, it should be the person responsible for the mission. That's noble, Dax observed. Also incredibly stubborn. Comes with the job, Sisko said with a slight smile. Dax, if I don't make it back, if the Defiant gets stranded or destroyed, you need to ensure the Federation remembers what happened here. Two civilizations that spent 150 years at war learned to cooperate when circumstances demanded it. That's an important lesson. I'll remember, Dax promised. But Benjamin, you're coming back. Because if you don't, I'll have to explain to Jake why his father decided to play hero instead of letting someone else take the risk. And I really don't want to have that conversation. Sisko thought of his son, back on Earth, safe from the war, oblivious to the fact that his father was about to risk everything on a mission that might leave him stranded 70,000 light-years from home in a hostile quadrant of space. Tell Jake I love him, Sisko said. And tell him his father did what he thought was right, even when right was terrifying. 2 hours later, the Defiant slipped through the Bajoran wormhole into the Gamma Quadrant, its cloaking device engaged, its sensors at maximum sensitivity. Behind it, thousands of warships completed final preparations for dimensional transit. 6 hours. That's all the time remaining before they committed to a procedure that would either return them home or trap them forever. In those 6 hours, everything could go wrong. And on the Founder's homeworld, the female changeling smiled her liquid smile and gave the order to deploy the subspace distortion weapon. The trap was set. The question was whether anyone would see it before it closed. The Defiant drifted through the Gamma Quadrant on minimal power, cloaked and silent, watching the Dominion's response to the raid with cold calculation. Sisko sat in a command chair studying sensor displays that showed something deeply concerning. The Dominion wasn't assembling a fleet. They're not mobilizing warships, Worf observed from tactical, his Klingon warrior instincts clearly troubled by the absence of conventional military response. After we destroyed 3 strategic facilities, the Founders should be organizing a retaliatory strike. Instead, their fleet movements suggest defensive repositioning. Because they're not planning a conventional assault, Sisko replied, watching as sensor data updated with new information. They're doing exactly what Odo predicted, preparing something that bypasses our numerical advantage. Dax, what are those energy signatures near the wormhole's Gamma Quadrant entrance? Chief O'Brien's fingers danced across his engineering console. Commander, I'm detecting massive subspace distortions forming in a spherical pattern around the wormhole. It's not natural, someone's generating them artificially. The energy output is enormous, and it's building towards some kind of synchronized discharge. Subspace weapons, Sisko said grimly. They're going to destabilize the wormhole itself. If they can disrupt subspace in this region, they'll prevent us from using it for transit during the dimensional stabilization window. Clever, Bashir observed from his medical station, his genetically enhanced mind quickly grasping the tactical implications. They can't stop us from attempting dimensional transit, but they can make it impossible for us to coordinate the operation. If the wormhole becomes impassable, our reconnaissance capability is eliminated and your fleets lose their exit route back to Alpha Quadrant space. When will the weapon reach critical discharge? Sisko asked. Approximately 90 minutes, O'Brien reported. Once it fires, the subspace distortions will propagate through the wormhole's interior structure. Transit will become impossible for at least 6 hours, well beyond the window we have for dimensional stabilization. Can we stop it? Worf asked, his hand already moving toward weapons controls. The weapon installations are distributed across 12 different platforms, O'Brien replied, pulling up tactical data. Heavily shielded, defended by automated systems and Jem'Hadar garrison forces. The Defiant could destroy maybe 2 or 3 platforms before the others activated and we were overwhelmed. We'd need a fleet-scale assault to eliminate them all simultaneously. Which we don't have, Sisko said. And even if we transmitted this intelligence to DS9, our fleets couldn't organize a response in 90 minutes. By the time strike forces assembled and transited the wormhole, the weapon would have already fired. Then we're trapped, Bashir said quietly. The Dominion succeeds in preventing dimensional transit without firing a single conventional shot. Sisko stared at the tactical display, his command instincts running through scenarios and discarding them as insufficient. The Dominion had created a perfect trap: eliminate the subspace weapon platforms and risk destruction before completing the mission, or allow them to fire and watch the entire dimensional stabilization operation collapse. Unless... Chief, Sisko said slowly, you said the weapon installations are generating synchronized subspace distortions. That means they're networked, coordinating their discharge timing through some kind of central control system. Aye, sir, O'Brien confirmed. The platforms are autonomous, but they're receiving synchronization signals from a command node. Probably on one of the Dominion's capital ships near the wormhole. Find me that ship, Sisko ordered. If we can disrupt the synchronization network, the platforms won't be able to coordinate their discharge. The weapon might fire, but without synchronized timing, the subspace distortions won't create the cascading effect needed to destabilize the wormhole. Worf's tactical display updated as sensors penetrated Dominion formations. Commander, I have located the probable command vessel. Vorta diplomatic cruiser, enhanced communications array, positioned at the center of the weapons platform formation. It is heavily shielded and escorted by 6 Jem'Hadar attack ships. One ship, Sisko said. One target that we can eliminate if we're willing to decloak and commit to full assault. Chief, can the Defiance weapons penetrate that cruiser's shields and destroy its communications array before the escort ships destroy us? O'Brien ran calculations, his engineer's mind processing combat variables and probability matrices. Maybe. If we approach at maximum impulse, decloak at point-blank range, and fire quantum torpedoes at the communications array specifically, we'd have about 15 seconds before the escort ships achieved weapons lock. That's enough time for 2, maybe 3 torpedo salvos. If the array is as vulnerable as standard Dominion architecture suggests, we could destroy it. But Commander, we'd be declaking in the middle of Dominion space surrounded by hostile forces. The moment we fire, every ship in sensor range will converge on our position. How long to reach the wormhole after we destroy the array? Sisko asked. At maximum warp, with every Dominion ship in the quadrant pursuing us? O'Brien considered. 3 minutes. Maybe 4 if they deploy subspace interdiction fields. And the dimensional stabilization window begins in 4 hours, Sisko said. If we destroy the array now, we have to survive 3 minutes of running from the entire Dominion fleet, transit the wormhole while being fired upon, and reach DS9 before the stabilization begins. That's ambitious. That's suicidal, Bashir corrected. Commander, the probability of surviving this operation is negligible. Doctor, Worf rumbled, his Klingon honor clearly engaged, since when do we base our decisions on probability? The mission requires we prevent the subspace weapon from firing. The only way to achieve that objective is to destroy the command node. Therefore, we destroy the command node. Whether we survive is secondary to mission success. Worf's right, Sisko said, though his voice carried the weight of sending his crew into what might be their final battle. We didn't come here to play it safe. We came here to ensure our allies could return home. If that requires sacrificing the Defiant to buy them the time they need. He paused, meeting each crew member's eyes. I won't order anyone to accept this mission. It's volunteer only. Anyone who wants to transfer to a runabout and attempt independent extraction has 5 minutes to say so. No one moved. Stubborn Starfleet officers, Sisko said with grim pride. Very well. Battle stations. We're going to decloak in the middle of the Dominion fleet, destroy their command cruiser, and then run like hell. Chief, prepare quantum torpedoes, full spread, targeted on that communications array. Worf, the moment we fire, plot a warp course directly to the wormhole. Don't worry about optimal trajectories, I want maximum speed regardless of fuel efficiency. We only need to survive long enough to reach the Alpha Quadrant. Aye, Commander, O'Brien and Worf replied simultaneously. The Defiant altered course, its cloaking device concealing its approach as it accelerated toward the Dominion formation. Sisko watched the tactical display as the distance closed, 1,000 kilometers, 500, 200. The Vorta command cruiser grew larger on the view screen, its enhanced communications array clearly visible, a massive dish-shaped structure covered in subspace transceivers. 50 kilometers, Worf reported. Entering optimal firing range. Hold until 20 kilometers, Sisko ordered. Maximum surprise, maximum impact. The Defiant continued its silent approach, a ghost ship carrying quantum torpedoes toward an enemy that didn't know it was already dead. 20 kilometers, Worf announced. Decloak and fire. Sisko commanded. The Defiant dropped its cloaking device and opened fire in the same instant, 6 quantum torpedoes launching from forward tubes in rapid succession, their matter-antimatter warhead streaking toward the Vorta cruiser's communications array. The torpedoes impacted before Dominion sensors fully registered the Defiant's presence, their explosions tearing through the array's structure with devastating precision. The communications array exploded, taking half the cruiser's superstructure with it. Throughout the Dominion weapons platform network, synchronization signals disappeared. The platform's automated systems attempted to compensate, but without central coordination, their carefully timed discharge sequence collapsed into chaos. Direct hit. O'Brien shouted. Communications array destroyed. The weapon platforms are losing synchronization. Warp speed, now. Sisko ordered. The Defiant's warp engines engaged at maximum power, accelerating the ship away from the dying Vorta cruiser as Jem'Hadar escort ships finally achieved weapons lock and opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked past the Defiant's hull, one scoring a glancing hit that dropped shields to 70%. Multiple contacts pursuing. Worf reported. 6 Jem'Hadar attack ships, 2 Vorta cruisers, and... Commander, a Dominion battleship is moving to intercept our wormhole approach vector. They're trying to cut us off. Can we outrun them? Sisko asked, the Defiant shaking as another plasma bolt hammered their shields. Not if they establish a blockade at the wormhole entrance, O'Brien replied. That battleship has the firepower to destroy us in one salvo if we try to force passage. Sisko's command instincts ran through tactical options, discarding each as insufficient. They needed the wormhole to return to DS9, but the Dominion was positioning forces to prevent exactly that. Unless they found a way to break through or bypass the blockade, they'd be trapped in the Gamma Quadrant with no way home. Then Bashir spoke up from his station, his genetically enhanced mind having processed a solution everyone else had missed. Commander, the wormhole is stable because the prophets maintain it. They're non-corporeal beings who exist within the wormhole's subspace structure. What if we ask them for help? Doctor, we're being chased by a fleet, Sisko replied. I don't have time for theological discussions with non-linear beings. You don't need time, Bashir insisted. The prophets don't experience linear causality. From their perspective, this moment and the moment you reach the wormhole entrance are simultaneous. If you call out to them now, right now, while we're being pursued, they might respond by the time we arrive. It was insane. It was impossible. It violated every principle of cause and effect that defined linear existence. It was also their only chance. Prophets of the Celestial Temple. Sisko called out, feeling ridiculous but desperate enough to try anything. This is the Sisko. I need your help. The Dominion is trying to prevent my ship from reaching the wormhole. If you can hear me, if you can act across non-linear time, I'm asking you to help us now. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. The Defiant continued its desperate flight, Dominion forces converging from multiple vectors, the battleship positioning itself to block wormhole access. Then the Prophets answered. The wormhole blazed with light, not the normal blue-white opening, but something more intense, more deliberate. The dimensional passage expanded beyond its normal parameters, its event horizon reaching out like hands grasping for the Defiant. The Dominion battleship, positioned directly in front of the wormhole's entrance, suddenly found itself inside the wormhole's interior space. The wormhole is pulling us in. O'Brien shouted. I'm reading massive spatial distortions, the Prophets are manipulating the wormhole structure. The Defiant was yanked forward by forces that transcended conventional physics, pulled into the wormhole's passage like a fish caught in a current. Around them, the Dominion battleship tumbled helplessly through the nonlinear interior space, its weapons unable to target anything in the impossible geometry. 60 seconds later, the Defiant emerged in Alpha Quadrant space, system strained but intact. Behind them, the wormhole's entrance contracted back to normal parameters, and the Dominion battleship, caught mid-transit, was unceremoniously ejected back into the Gamma Quadrant with most of its navigational systems fried by exposure to nonlinear physics. We're through, Worf reported, something like relief in his normally stoic voice. DS9 is 3 million kilometers ahead. The dimensional stabilization sequence has not yet begun. Thank the Prophets, Sisko said, then paused. Literally. Thank you, Prophets. A voice filled the Defiant's bridge, multiple voices speaking in unison, coming from everywhere and nowhere, the Sisko asked. We answered. Linear beings helped. We help linear beings. This is balance. Then the presence vanished, leaving only normal space and the sight of thousands of warships preparing for dimensional transit. Sisko slumped in his command chair, adrenaline fading and leaving exhaustion in its wake. Dax, this is Defiant. We're inbound with critical intelligence. Delay the stabilization sequence, the Dominion deployed subspace weapons, but we've neutralized the threat. Repeat, proceed with stabilization on original schedule. The path is clear. Benjamin. Dax's voice carried undisguised relief. We detected the weapons platforms activating and thought, never mind what we thought. You're alive, the threat is neutralized, and we're ready to begin final countdown. Get back here so I can yell at you properly for taking unnecessary risks. Unnecessary risks are kind of my specialty, Sisko replied. Defiant out. As the ship approached DS9, Sisko found himself thinking about the Prophet's intervention. Nonlinear beings who didn't understand human motivation had chosen to help anyway, crossing the boundaries of their own alien nature because he'd asked. It suggested that perhaps understanding wasn't always necessary for cooperation, sometimes trust was enough. He hoped that lesson would matter for what came next. Because in 3 hours, both fleets would commit to dimensional stabilization. And 30 minutes after that, they'd either succeed in going home or fail catastrophically. No other options remained. The final hour before dimensional stabilization began felt like the moment before a battle, that suspended time when strategies were complete, forces deployed, and nothing remained but to execute the plan and accept whatever consequences followed. On Deep Space Nine, in the command centers of Brunhild and Hyperion, and aboard thousands of warships positioned around the dimensional breach, officers and crew waited with the particular tension that came from knowing their next actions would be irreversible. Sisko stood in DS9's operations center, surrounded by his senior staff and the holographic presence of both foreign admirals. The dimensional breach pulsed on viewscreens and tactical displays, smaller now than when both fleets had emerged, but still a wound in reality that needed to be sealed properly rather than allowed to collapse naturally. "Final status check," Sisko said, his command voice steady despite 3 days of continuous crisis management. "Dax. All energy transfer networks are operational," Dax reported from her science station. "Both fleets report their reactors are synchronized and ready for coordinated discharge. The Prophet's modifications to the breach are holding. We have a stable dimensional framework that should resonate with the energy input. When we begin the sequence, we'll have approximately 30 minutes to complete the operation. After that, either the breach stabilizes into a traversable passage or it collapses catastrophically." "Fleet status?" Sisko asked, turning to Kira. "Both Imperial and Alliance formations are in position," Kira confirmed. "All vessels have diverted non-essential systems to prepare for energy discharge. Weapons are minimal power, shields are at 20%, and navigation is set to automated protocols. Commander, once this begins, both fleets will be completely vulnerable. If anything attacks during the 30-minute window, then DS-9's defenses and the few combat-ready vessels we've kept in reserve will have to hold," Sisko finished. "It's not ideal, but we've eliminated the immediate Dominion threat. We have to trust that 30 minutes is short enough that they can't organize another attack." On the holographic display, Reinhard von Lohengramm stood on Brunhild's bridge looking as composed as if he were attending a state dinner rather than preparing for dimensional transit that might kill everyone under his command. "Commander Sisko, the Imperial fleet is ready. All 1,700 vessels have completed preparations. My crews understand the risks and accept them. When you give the order, we will begin the energy discharge sequence." Wen-li appeared on the adjacent holographic display, his rumpled uniform and exhausted expression contrasting sharply with Reinhard's aristocratic perfection. Despite his appearance, his voice carried absolute certainty. "The Alliance fleet is ready as well. 1,500 ships, all prepared for synchronized discharge. Commander, we've survived 150 years of war through worse odds than this. Whatever happens in the next 30 minutes, we'll face it together." "Then we're committed," Sisko said. He activated the station-wide communication system. "All stations, this is Commander Sisko. In 60 seconds, we will begin the dimensional stabilization sequence. To our guests from another universe, your courage, your sacrifice, and your willingness to cooperate despite 150 years of war has been an honor to witness. The Federation will remember what you've accomplished here. And to my crew, Starfleet's finest, thank you for rising to challenges we never imagined facing. Whatever happens next, you've all exceeded every expectation." He paused, then continued with the words that would commit them all to irreversible action. "Begin final countdown. 60 seconds to dimensional stabilization. May the prophets watch over us all." Throughout both fleets, countdown timers synchronized. 60 seconds. 50. 40. On Brunhild, Reinhard stood before his command throne. He never sat during critical operations, watching as his officers executed final system checks with the precision that centuries of imperial military tradition had instilled. Curtius stood beside him, loyal as always, his presence a reminder that even legends needed someone to share the weight of command. "Reinhard," Curtius said quietly, pitched so only his friend could hear, "if this fails and we're stranded here permanently, what will we do?" "We'll adapt," Reinhard replied. "Build a new empire, carve territory from this universe's powers, continue the work we started in our own reality. I didn't spend decades fighting corrupt aristocrats and incompetent politicians only to become a refugee dependent on others' charity." "And if we succeed?" Curtius asked. "If we return home and resume the war with the Alliance? Then Yang and I will continue our chess match across the galaxy," Reinhard said. "We'll maneuver fleets, sacrifice pieces, seek the decisive engagement that ends the conflict. It's what we were born to do, Curtius. We're predators shaped by 150 years of warfare. Taking us out of that context doesn't change what we are. Curtius nodded slowly, recognizing the truth his friend wouldn't fully admit, that Reinhard needed the war almost as much as he wanted to end it, because victory without worthy opposition would be hollow. 30 seconds. On Hyperion, Yang slouched in his command chair, a cigarette burning between his fingers despite the imminent energy discharge that made smoking technically inadvisable. Julian stood nearby, young and nervous, while Frederica coordinated final systems checks with the efficient competence that made Yang's chaotic command style functional. "Admiral," Julian asked quietly, "when we return home, will the war continue the same way? Or will this experience, working with the Empire, seeing that cooperation is possible, change anything?" Yang took a long drag on his cigarette, considering his answer carefully. "Julian, listen closely because this is the most important lesson I can teach you about politics and war. Individuals can change. Commanders can learn. Even enemies can develop respect and understanding. But institutions, governments, military traditions, political structures, those change very slowly if at all. Reinhard and I work together here because circumstances forced us to. When we return, those circumstances will vanish and the institutional momentum of 150 years of war will reassert itself." "That's depressing," Julian observed. "That's realistic," Yang corrected. "But here's the thing, Julian, the fact that institutions are slow to change doesn't mean individuals should stop trying to change them. Maybe this experience will plant seeds. Maybe some officers who served here will remember that the enemy isn't inherently evil, just ideologically opposed. Maybe that memory will make them slightly less willing to escalate unnecessarily, slightly more willing to consider peaceful alternatives. Change happens incrementally, not through dramatic revolutions." "So there's hope?" Julian asked. "There's always hope," Yang replied. "Just not certainty. Which is why we keep trying anyway." 20 seconds. In DS9's operations, Daxa's hands moved across her console, finalizing calculations that would determine whether dimensional physics could be manipulated precisely enough to create stable passage between universes. "Benjamin, I'm detecting some unexpected resonance patterns in the breach. The energy signature is fluctuating in ways our models didn't predict. Can we compensate?" Sisko asked. "I think so," Dax replied. "But it means the stabilization might take longer than 30 minutes. Maybe as much as 45. Can both fleets maintain power output for that duration?" Sisko opened channels to both admirals simultaneously. "We may need to extend the energy discharge beyond 30 minutes. Can your vessels sustain that?" "The Empire can," Reinhard confirmed immediately. "We'll push our reactors to maximum tolerance. If necessary, I'll order older vessels to go critical and evacuate their crews before reactor failure. We won't let power limitations stop us." "The Alliance will match Imperial output," Yang said, though his expression suggested he knew exactly how many ships would suffer catastrophic failures from extended discharge. "We've survived by pushing our equipment beyond design specifications for 150 years. We can do it for 45 more minutes. Then we proceed," Sisko decided. "All vessels, be advised, energy discharge may exceed original projections. Maintain output regardless of system strain. This is our only chance." 10 seconds. Every ship, every crew member, every person who participated in this unprecedented cooperation felt time compress into the final countdown. Centuries of military tradition, decades of personal experience, years of war and sacrifice, all converging on this single moment. 5 seconds. Reinhard and Yang, enemies who become temporary allies, met each other's eyes across the holographic display, a moment of recognition between kindred spirits who understood that they were more similar than either would admit. 3 seconds. Sisko thought of Jake, safe on Earth, oblivious to the fact that his father was about to attempt something that would either make history or destroy everyone involved. 2 seconds. Across thousands of ships, engineering crews placed their hands on control interfaces, ready to initiate the energy discharge that would either save their fleets or kill them all. 1 second. Execute, Sisko ordered. 3,200 ships discharged their fusion reactors simultaneously. Energy poured from Imperial cruisers, Alliance destroyers, and connecting nodes on Deep Space Nine, massive power output channeled through hastily constructed networks toward the dimensional breach. The energy didn't travel through normal space, it propagated through subspace, following pathways that Dax and the engineering teams from 3 civilizations had calculated with desperate precision. The dimensional breach responded immediately. Its contracting edges stopped shrinking and began expanding, not with the chaotic instability of its original appearance but with controlled resonance. The impossible colors that had marked it as a wound between realities shifted towards something more stable, purple and blue energies organizing into geometric patterns that suggested underlying mathematical structure. Resonance achieved. Dax shouted over the sound of power systems straining across the station. The breach is responding to the energy input. I'm reading dimensional harmonics that match both universes simultaneously. On every ship in both fleets, power systems groaned under unprecedented strain. Reactors designed for sustained combat output were being pushed to discharge levels that exceeded safety tolerances. Warning lights flashed across thousands of bridges. Automated safety systems screened recommendations to shut down before catastrophic failure occurred. Every crew overrode the safety systems and kept the power flowing. Alliance vessel Destiny reporting critical reactor failure, Frederica announced on Hyperion. They're evacuating crew to escape pods. Destiny will achieve reactor breach in 3 minutes. Note it and continue, Ong ordered, his voice steady despite watching one of his ships die. Tell Destiny's crew they're heroes. Their sacrifice matters. Imperial destroyer Valkyrie experiencing cascade system failure, Curtius reported on Brunhild. Crew evacuation underway. Reactor containment at 17%. Continued discharge until containment reaches 5%, then evacuate and scuttle, Reinhard ordered. Every second of power output brings us closer to success. The dimensional breach continued expanding, its stable resonance creating a passage that looked different from the chaotic tear that had brought both fleets here. This was controlled, deliberate, a bridge between realities rather than a wound. 15 minutes elapsed, Dax reported. Dimensional stability increasing. We're halfway there, but Benjamin, I'm detecting strain on DS9's power grid. We're channeling energy through systems never designed for this kind of load. If we lose station power, the entire network collapses. Can you compensate? Sisko asked. I'm trying, Dax replied, her hands moving faster than human reflexes should allow across her console. But we need more time than we calculated. 45 minutes might not be enough. This could take a full hour. An hour. 60 minutes of maximum reactor discharge. The casualty projections for that duration were catastrophic, potentially 15% of both fleets suffering terminal system failures. Hundreds of ships. Tens of thousands of lives. All vessels, be advised, Sisko transmitted across all channels. Dimensional stabilization will require extended discharge. Minimum 60 minutes, possibly longer. Ships experiencing critical failure should evacuate crews and maintain discharge until reactor breach is imminent. This is not a request, this is operational necessity. Across both fleets, crews processed this information and reached the same conclusion, they'd committed to this operation knowing the risks. Extended discharge meant more ships would die, but failure meant everyone would be stranded. The mathematics were brutal but clear. They kept the power flowing. 25 minutes. The dimensional breach had expanded to twice its original size, its interior showing stable passage between universes. Through the opening, sensors could detect the far side, the Iserlohn corridor where both fleets had been pulled from during their battle. I'm reading home space, an Imperial sensor officer shouted on Brunhild. The passage is traversable. We could begin transit. Negative, Reinhard ordered sharply. We maintain energy discharge until the breach achieves complete stability. Premature transit could destabilize the passage and trap ships mid-crossing. We wait. Yang gave identical orders to his fleet. Both admirals understood that patience now would save lives later, even as impatience and hope warred with discipline in every crew member's heart. 30 minutes. 35. 40. More ships reported critical failures. Crews evacuated in life pods and shuttles, picked up by vessels with capacity to spare. The fleet was hemorrhaging material even as it achieved its objective, burning itself like a candle to provide the light needed to find the way home. 45 minutes, Dax announced, her voice strained from continuous system management. Dimensional stability at 92%. We're close, Benjamin. So close. Can you project time to full stability? Sisko asked. Approximately 10 more minutes, Dax replied. But Commander, DS9's power grid is at critical levels. We've got emergency systems failing throughout the station. If we lose containment on our own reactor before the breach stabilizes, then we don't lose containment, Sisko said firmly. Chief O'Brien, how long can you keep the station online? O'Brien's voice crackled over the comm from engineering. Commander, I'm performing miracles down here, but even miracles have limits. The power grid is overheating. I can give you maybe 15 more minutes before we have cascading failures throughout the station. 15 minutes. They needed 10 for the breach to stabilize, plus time for fleet transit. The margin was razor thin. Do it, Chief, Sisko ordered. Keep us online. Whatever it takes. 50 minutes. The dimensional breach achieved 98% stability. Its edges no longer fluctuated, they held firm, a permanent bridge between universes maintained by the combined output of three civilizations' technology. Stability threshold reached. Dax announced. The passage is fully traversable. Both fleets can begin transit. All Imperial vessels, Reinhard transmitted immediately, begin dimensional passage in sequence. Heavy cruisers first, then destroyers, then support vessels. Maintain formation discipline. Anyone who panics and breaks sequence will be court-martialed on the other side. Alliance fleet, begin transit, Yang ordered. Heaviest ships first to establish the passage's structural integrity, lighter vessels follow. And remember, we went through hell to get this passage open. Don't waste it by being impatient. The fleets began moving, thousands of warships approaching the dimensional breach in organized sequences. Imperial vessels entered first, their rigid formation discipline ensuring no collisions or chaos. Alliance ships followed with looser but still coordinated approach patterns. Each ship that crossed disappeared from sensors, translated into their home universe 70,000 light-years away and 150 years of war. Each successful transit confirmed that the passage held, that the desperate gamble had worked. 55 minutes, Dax reported. Fleet transit proceeding on schedule. At current rate, full transit will complete in 20 minutes. Can DS9 hold for 20 more minutes? Sisko asked. No, O'Brien replied bluntly over the comm, we've got maybe 5 minutes before catastrophic failure. Commander, you need to shut down the energy network now, or we lose the station. If we shut down now, the passage might destabilize before all ships transit, Dax said. We could trap vessels mid-crossing. Sisko watched his tactical display showing thousands of ships still waiting to cross, knowing that each represented hundreds or thousands of lives that depended on his decisions. He thought of everything they'd accomplished, the cooperation, the sacrifice, the bridges built between civilizations. And he thought about the fact that sometimes, the only choice was which tragedy to accept. Reduce power output gradually, Sisko ordered. Taper the discharge over the next 10 minutes. Give the breach time to self-stabilize while we bring the station back to survivable parameters. Benjamin, Dax protested, if the breach destabilizes during transit. Then some ships won't make it home, Sisko interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of command decisions that would haunt him forever. But if we maintain full discharge, DS9 fails and everyone still waiting to transit dies anyway. This is the best bad option we have. The energy discharge began tapering. Gradually, carefully, the massive power output reduced while fleet transit continued. The dimensional breach held, the Prophet's modifications and the sheer momentum of the stabilization process keeping it open even as energy input decreased. But it was contracting. Slowly, inexorably, the passage was beginning to close. On Brunhild and Hyperion, both flagships positioned to transit last, ensuring their crews were the last to safety, Reinhard and Young watched the same calculations and reached the same conclusion. Some ships weren't going to make it through before the passage closed. The question was which ships, and how many lives they represented. And whether two legendary commanders could accept sacrificing their own people to ensure the majority survived. The dimensional breach contracted with mathematical inevitability, its edges folding inward as the reduced energy output allowed natural forces to reassert themselves. Sisko watched from DS9's operations as vessel after vessel successfully transited, each disappearing from sensors in the Alpha Quadrant and reappearing in the Iserlohn corridor 70,000 light-years away and one universe over. But the numbers were inexorable. 2,000 ships had already crossed. 800 remained in the transit queue. And the breach was closing faster than projected. "Commander," Dax said, her voice tight with controlled panic, "at current contraction rate, the breach will collapse to non-traversable dimensions in approximately 8 minutes. The remaining vessels cannot all transit in that window. Even if they abandon formation discipline and rush the passage, we'll lose at least 200 ships. 200 ships. Potentially 40,000 lives, trapped permanently in a universe not their own, separated forever from homes and families they'd fought 150 years to protect." "Which ships are at the back of the transit queue?" Sisko asked. "Mixed Imperial and Alliance vessels," Kira reported from Tactical. "Mostly older destroyers, supply ships, and..." She paused, checking data. "Both flagships." Brunhild and Hyperion positioned themselves last in sequence, ensuring their fleets went first. Of course they did, Sisko thought. Legendary commanders didn't ask others to accept risks they wouldn't take themselves. "Hail both admirals," Sisko ordered. "Emergency channel." Reinhard and Yang's faces appeared on split-screen displays, both clearly aware of the situation unfolding around them. Behind Reinhard, Brunhild's bridge crew maintained disciplined efficiency despite the fact that their flagship might not make it home. Behind Yang, Hyperion's crew showed similar resolve, though their exhaustion was more visible. "Commander Sisko," Reinhard said before Sisko could speak, "we understand the situation. The breach is collapsing faster than projected. Not all vessels will transit successfully. Do not waste time attempting to reassure us, we're military officers. We understand operational realities." "What Reinhard means," Yang added with tired humor, "is that we've spent our entire careers calculating acceptable losses. We know some ships won't make it through. The question is how we prioritize who goes and who stays. You should order both flagships to break sequence and transit immediately," Sisko said. "Your crews, your command experience, your strategic knowledge, losing either of you would be catastrophic for your civilizations. Protocol demands you preserve command assets." "Protocol," Reinhard replied coldly, "is written by people who've never had to choose between their own survival and their subordinates' lives." "Commander, I positioned Brunhild last in sequence deliberately. If I now break that sequence to save myself while condemning others to remain here, what message does that send? That aristocratic privilege matters more than shared sacrifice. That commanders value their own lives above their crews. The Empire needs you," Sisko pressed. "Your reforms, your vision for governance. Will continue through others if necessary," Reinhard interrupted. "Curtius knows my plans. Riuenthal and Mittermeier are competent enough to execute them. The Empire will survive my absence. What it cannot survive is the precedent that leaders abandon their principles when circumstances become difficult. Yang nodded in agreement. And the Alliance has learned through bitter experience that leaders who prioritize their own survival over their people's welfare inevitably become tyrants. If I break sequence to save myself, I become exactly what I've spent decades fighting against, someone who values personal preservation over duty. So you're both willing to die rather than accept pragmatic compromise, Sisko said. We're both willing to accept whatever consequences follow from our choices, Yang corrected. Commander, you did everything possible to give us this chance. The breach stabilization succeeded. Most of our fleets will return home. If some vessels remain here, including our flagships, then we adapt to that reality. The Federation has already demonstrated willingness to accept refugees. We'll negotiate terms for integration, find our place in this universe, and live with the knowledge that we sent our people home even if we couldn't go ourselves. Sisko looked at both admirals, enemies who'd become allies who'd become something approaching friends, and recognized the particular stubbornness that defined true leadership. They weren't being heroic. They weren't even being particularly noble. They were simply refusing to violate principles they'd spent lifetimes establishing. There might be another option, Dax interjected, her hands flying across her console. Benjamin, what if we don't try to save everyone? What if we accept that some ships won't transit, but we ensure those ships include vessels with the highest crew capacity? If we prioritize getting people through rather than getting ships through. We start evacuating crews from ships at the back of the queue onto ships at the front, Sisko finished, immediately grasping the logic. Abandon the ships, save the personnel. How long would that take? Too long, Kira said after rapid calculation. Even with transporters operating at maximum, we'd need 20 minutes to evacuate 40,000 people. The breach collapses in 8. Then we don't evacuate everyone, Yang said quietly. We prioritize. Families first, then specialists with irreplaceable knowledge, then general crew. And we accept that the people who remain, he stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Will be us, Reinhard completed. The command staff who positioned ourselves last. That's appropriate, Commander Sisko. We made this choice knowing the risks. Our crews shouldn't pay the price for our decisions. No, Curtius said suddenly on Brunhild's bridge, speaking with an intensity that made even Reinhard pause. Admiral, you can't sacrifice yourself for abstract principle. The Empire needs you. I need you. If you remain here while the rest of us return, then you'll continue my work, Reinhard said gently, his ice-blue eyes softening as he looked at his oldest friend. Curtius, you've always been my conscience. If I'm not there to lead, you'll ensure the Empire becomes what we envisioned, merit-based, efficient, free from the corruption that plagued it for centuries. You're fully capable of that. But it won't be the same without you, Curtius said, his voice cracking slightly. No, Reinhard agreed. But it will still matter. The work is bigger than any one person, even me. On Hyperion, Julian was having a similar conversation with Yang. Admiral, you can't stay here. Who will protect the Alliance from? From its own corruption and inefficiency? Yang interrupted with tired humor. Julian, the Alliance has survived 150 years of war and political dysfunction. It'll survive my absence. You've learned everything I can teach you about tactics and strategy. Frederica knows the logistics and political landscape better than I do. Between you, you can protect the Alliance's democratic principles even without me. But you're the miracle Yang, Julian protested. The legendary tactician. Who's tired, Julian, Yang said quietly. So very tired. I've fought this war since I was barely older than you. Every battle won means another battle coming. Every strategy that works means the enemy adapts and I have to create a new one. It never ends. Maybe. He paused, lighting what might be his final cigarette. Maybe staying here is a different kind of miracle. A chance to stop fighting. To study history instead of making it. To live without the weight of knowing that every decision I make determines whether thousands live or die. You're saying you want to stay? Julian asked, disbelief evident. I'm saying I've made peace with it, Yang replied. There's a difference. Sisko watched these conversations unfold, recognizing that both admirals had already accepted their fate. They weren't panicking or seeking desperate alternatives, they were preparing their subordinates for leadership transitions and ensuring their life's work would continue without them. It was the most impressive display of command discipline Sisko had ever witnessed. And he refused to accept it. Admirals, Sisko said, his voice carrying command authority that transcended rank or universe, I appreciate your nobility, and I understand your principles. But I'm not watching two of the greatest military minds in either universe sacrifice themselves because of pride. Dax, how many ships can we evacuate if we use DS-9 as a staging point? If vessels at the back of the queue transport their crews here, we hold them temporarily, then transport them onto ships transiting through. Dax ran calculations. It would take perfect coordination, but theoretically we could save maybe 60% of the remaining personnel. That's better than nothing. Do it, Sisko ordered. All ships in the final 200 positions, begin emergency crew evacuation to DS-9. We'll stage personnel and transfer them to transiting vessels. Move now. Across both fleets, transporters activated. Crew members materialized on DS-9 in designated cargo bays and promenade sections, thousands of people appearing in golden light, confused but alive. Starfleet personnel directed traffic, ensuring no overcrowding or chaos as the station became a temporary refugee center. 6 minutes until breach collapse, Dax announced. We've evacuated 12,000 personnel. 28,000 remain on ships that won't make it through. Keep going, Sisko ordered. Every life we save matters. On Brunhild, Reinhard watched his crew evacuate, officers and ratings materializing away to DS-9, leaving the flagship progressively more empty. Soon only he and Curtius remained on the massive bridge, surrounded by automated systems maintaining the ship's position in the transit queue. Reinhard, Curtius said, there's still time. We can transport to DS-9, join the evacuation. And abandon Brunhild? Reinhard replied. No. This ship is a symbol of everything I built. If she doesn't go home, then neither do I. It's poetic, in a way. On Hyperion, Yang faced a similar situation. His crew had evacuated, leaving only him, Julian, and Frederica on the battered flagship that had carried him through countless battles. Admiral, please, Frederica said, her professional composure finally cracking. Don't make us return without you. The Alliance needs. The Alliance needs you and Julian, Yang interrupted gently. You represent its future. I'm just a tired old man who's fought too many battles. Let me rest, Frederica. Please. For minutes, Dax announced. 23,000 personnel evacuated. 5,000 remain on ships. Sisko made a decision that violated every protocol, every regulation, every principle of military hierarchy, but honored the one principle that mattered most. Override both flagships' transporter systems, Sisko ordered. Beam both admirals directly to DS-9 without their authorization. Do it now. Commander, that's, Kira started to protest. An order, Sisko finished. I'm not letting them die for pride. Transport them now. On Brunhild, Reinhard realized what was happening a split second before the transporter beam caught him. No. Commander Sisko, you have no authority to. Golden light consumed him and Curtius, materializing them on DS-9's transporter pad. On Hyperion, Yang had just enough time to smile, recognizing the tactical maneuver and appreciating its audacity, before he, Julian, and Frederica were similarly transported against their will to the station. 2 minutes until collapse, Dax announced. Final ships transiting now. The last vessels rushed through the dimensional breach, their crews safely evacuated, the ships themselves abandoned to cross unmanned or remain as monuments to sacrifice. Brunhild and Hyperion, both flagships that had carried legendary commanders through 150 years of war, approached the contracting passage. 1 minute, Dax reported. Both flagships entered the breach simultaneously, their automated systems guiding them through the unstable passage. For 30 agonizing seconds, sensors lost contact, the ships existing in dimensional superposition between universes. Then confirmation signals arrived from the Iserlohn corridor. Both flagships had successfully transited. Damaged, unmanned, but intact and recoverable. Breach collapse imminent, Dax announced. 20 seconds. The few remaining ships, approximately 40 vessels whose crews had been evacuated, hung in space as the dimensional breach contracted around them. They wouldn't make it through. But their crews were safe on DS9, and that was what mattered. The breach collapsed to a pinpoint and vanished, leaving only residual exotic particles and the memory of what had been achieved. Silence filled DS9's operations as everyone processed what had just happened. They'd succeeded. Most of both fleets had returned home. Casualties were significant but far below worst-case projections. And 2 legendary admirals were standing in the transporter room, furious at being forcibly evacuated from their flagships. Sisko left operations and headed for the transporter room, preparing for what would undoubtedly be an uncomfortable conversation with 2 very angry military geniuses who'd been outmaneuvered by someone they'd underestimated. He found them exactly as expected, Reinhard standing rigid with barely controlled rage, Jan looking exhausted but somehow amused despite everything. "Commander Sisko," Reinhard said, his voice colder than the void of space, "you violated my direct orders, overrode my command authority, and forcibly removed me from my flagship against my explicit wishes. This is an outrage that demands explanation." Sisko interrupted. "Fine. Here's your explanation, Admiral. I didn't spend 3 days coordinating the most complex military operation in Federation history just to watch 2 of the greatest strategic minds in either universe commit suicide for pride. You want to be noble. You want to sacrifice yourselves for principles. Do it when it actually matters, not when pragmatic alternatives exist. Our crews," Reinhard started. "Are safe," Sisko finished. 28,000 personnel evacuated. Your flagships transited successfully, unmanned but recoverable. Both your fleets returned home with minimal casualties. Mission accomplished, Admirals. You're welcome." Jan laughed, actual genuine laughter that seemed to surprise even him. "Commander Sisko, you just tactical maneuvered 2 people who've spent their careers tactical maneuvering entire fleets. That takes audacity I have to respect." "I don't respect it," Reinhard said coldly. "I respect competence, dedication, and understanding of proper command structure. What I don't respect is subordinates overriding legitimate command decisions because they disagree with watching good people die unnecessarily." Sisko interrupted again. "Admiral von Lohengramm, you're absolutely right that I violated protocol. Court-martial me if it makes you feel better. But those 28,000 people are alive because I refuse to let you make your principles more important than their lives. If that's insubordination, I'll wear the charge proudly." Reinhard stared at Sisko for a long moment, ice-blue eyes meeting dark brown in a battle of wills that transcended rank or universe. Then, impossibly, Reinhard smiled. Not his usual cold strategic satisfaction, but something approaching genuine warmth. "Commander Sisko," Reinhard said, "if you served in the Galactic Empire, I'd either promote you to Admiral or execute you for insubordination. Possibly both. You have my gratitude for saving my crew. You also have my annoyance for preventing what would have been a dramatically appropriate ending to this adventure. Consider those facts in balance." "I can live with that," Sisko replied. Jan stubbed out his cigarette and immediately lit another. "Commander, I have one question, what happens to us now? Our fleets returned home, but we're still here. Along with, He glanced at the station's internal sensors, approximately 5,000 other personnel who didn't make it through before the breach collapsed. What's the Federation's plan for us? Sisko had been dreading this question, knowing the answer would disappoint everyone involved. The truth? We don't know yet. Starfleet Command is debating options. Some admirals want to integrate you into Starfleet as a special tactical advisory unit. Others want to establish a separate enclave where you can maintain your own command structures. And some, he paused, want to study you, to understand how two civilizations developed such sophisticated military doctrine through 150 years of continuous warfare. In other words, Yang said, we're refugees with valuable skills that the Federation isn't sure how to use. We're too useful to ignore, too foreign to fully integrate, and too potentially dangerous to give complete autonomy. That's more blunt than I would have put it, Sisko admitted. But essentially accurate. Reinhard moved to the transporter room's viewport, staring at the space where the dimensional breach had been. So we saved our fleets but trapped ourselves. Poetic irony. The universe has a cruel sense of humor. Or, Yang said thoughtfully, the universe is giving us an opportunity we never had in our own reality. Reinhard, think about it, we've spent our entire adult lives fighting each other. Every strategy we developed, every tactic we perfected, it was all in service of a war neither of us truly believed was necessary. What if we spent that same energy building something instead of destroying it? What if we had the chance to prove that cooperation is possible, that enemies can become allies, that 150 years of war doesn't have to define us forever? That's idealistic nonsense, Reinhard replied. But his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Yang agreed. But we're stuck here regardless. Might as well make the best of it. Curtius approached Reinhard, his loyalty evident even in this strange new circumstance. Admiral, whatever you decide, I'll support you. If you want to find a way home, I'll help. If you want to build something new here, I'll help with that too. You're not alone. Reinhard looked at his friend, then at Yang, then at Sisko. Commander, I'll need time to consider our options. The 5,000 personnel stranded here will look to me for leadership. I can't make decisions hastily when so many lives depend on my choices. Take the time you need, Sisko replied. The Federation isn't going anywhere. And admirals, for what it's worth, you've already proven something important. Two civilizations that spent 150 years at war worked together when necessity demanded it. That's not nothing. That's evidence that maybe, just maybe, peace was always possible. You just needed circumstances to force you to try. As both admirals left the transporter room to address their stranded personnel, Dax joined Sisko at the viewport. Benjamin, she said quietly, you just changed history for two universes. You saved thousands of lives, enabled the largest dimensional transit ever attempted, and convinced two legendary enemies to cooperate. And now you've trapped them here with no clear way home. How do you feel about that? Sisko watched the stars, thinking about duty and sacrifice, about principles and pragmatism, about the choices leaders made when no good options existed. I feel, he said finally, like I did what was necessary. Whether it was right, ask me in a few years when we see what becomes of all this. Somewhere in the Iserlohn corridor, 70,000 light-years away and one universe over, two massive fleets emerged from dimensional transit, battered, reduced, but home. They carried stories of another reality, of cooperation with ancient enemies, of a federation that believed peace was possible. And in Deep Space Nine, 5,000 refugees from a war-torn universe began the long process of deciding what came next, whether to spend their lives seeking a way home, or building new lives in a reality that might offer the one thing their own universe never had. A chance to stop fighting. In the months that followed, the Federation established what came to be known as the Iserlohn Enclave, a semi-autonomous zone near Deep Space Nine where the stranded personnel from both the Galactic Empire and Free Planets Alliance could maintain their distinct cultural identities while gradually integrating into Alpha Quadrant society. Admiral Reinhard von Lohengramm, after extensive negotiation with Starfleet Command, accepted a position as special military advisor, his tactical genius employed to help prepare Federation defenses against the Dominion threat. His reforms and strategic insights would prove instrumental in the later stages of the Dominion War. Admiral Wen-li, true to his nature, declined any formal military position. Instead, he accepted a teaching role at Starfleet Academy, where his lectures on military history, tactical philosophy, and the costs of prolonged warfare became legendary. Students who studied under the exhausted, chain-smoking professor learned lessons that textbooks couldn't teach, that victory without purpose was hollow, that wars should be fought reluctantly if at all, and that the willingness to question orders was sometimes the highest form of loyalty. Siegfried Curtius remained at Reinhard's side, his friendship and moral guidance continuing to shape the former imperial admiral's decisions. Together, they worked to ensure the Iserlohn enclave avoided the autocratic pitfalls that had plagued the Galactic Empire, creating instead a meritocratic community that balanced efficiency with individual rights. The irony that Reinhard's greatest achievement occurred in a universe not his own was not lost on him, though he rarely acknowledged it. The dimensional breach never reopened. Starfleet Science Division studied the residual exotic particles for years, but the Prophet's modifications ensured the passage remained sealed. Messages could not cross between universes. The people who'd been separated that day, families divided, lovers torn apart, soldiers stranded from their homes, would never see each other again. It was a price paid for survival, a mathematics of sacrifice that Young and Reinhard understood better than most. In their home universe, the war between the Galactic Empire and Free Planets Alliance continued. But something had changed. Officers who'd served during the dimensional transit operation carried memories of cooperation with ancient enemies. Gradually, imperceptibly, those memories influenced decisions, truces lasted longer, peace negotiations were attempted more seriously, escalations were reconsidered. The war that had consumed 150 years would eventually end not through decisive military victory, but through mutual exhaustion and the slow recognition that continued conflict served no one's interests. Commander Sisko continued his command of Deep Space Nine, carrying the weight of decisions that had saved thousands while stranding others. He never learned if the choice had been right, only that it had been necessary. The prophets, in their nonlinear wisdom, never commented on his actions. Perhaps they approved. Perhaps they were simply indifferent to linear concerns. Either way, Sisko had learned that sometimes the burden of command meant living with uncertainty forever. And in quiet moments, when the station's operations settled into routine and the crisis had faded to memory, Benjamin Sisko would stand at his viewport and look at the space where the dimensional breach had been. He'd think about two legendary admirals who'd spent their lives as enemies, who'd become allies through necessity, and who'd ultimately been stranded together in a reality neither had chosen. He'd think about the fact that both men were, in their own ways, freer here than they'd ever been in their home universe, liberated from a war that had defined them, granted the chance to build something new rather than perpetually destroying what existed. And he'd wonder if perhaps the universe's sense of humor wasn't cruel after all. Perhaps it was simply offering an alternative that no one had thought to ask for, the opportunity to prove that peace was always possible, if people were simply willing to try. The lesson Reinhard von Lohengramm and Wen-li taught the Federation was simple but profound: enemies aren't born, they're created by circumstances, ideology, and the momentum of history. Change the circumstances, challenge the ideology, and break the historical momentum, and enemies could become allies. It was a lesson the Federation would remember when facing future conflicts, when deciding whether to escalate or negotiate, when choosing between pride and pragmatism. Two legendary commanders from another reality had shown them the way. All that remained was whether the Federation, and the galaxy, would have the courage to follow it. Live long and prosper. Hit the subscribe button for more stories.